Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? They never found the Callahan boy's body. That was the part that stuck with me. Not the blood, not the screams heard echoing through the trees that night. Not even the search dogs howling in frustration as they circled the house again and again. No, it was the silence afterward that crawled under your skin and refused to leave. As if the land itself had swallowed the child whole and waited, hungry, for the next one. That house, number 137 on Wickersham Road, was never truly empty. Even after the tragedy, even after the town boarded up the windows and draped it in condemned signs like yellow funeral ribbons, the place watched. People said you could feel it when you got too close. A sudden drop in temperature. A static hum in the air. Birds wouldn't nest near it. Dogs crossed the street to avoid it. Children whispered about the eyes in the walls. And I saw them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that summer, when we moved into the house next door. My dad had just gotten a job with the local fire department, and Mom thought small, town life might fix what the city had done to us. I was 12. My sister Abby was 9. We didn't know what we were walking into. It started the day we arrived. We hadn't even finished unpacking when Abby asked me something that made my blood freeze. "Who's the boy in the attic?" I laughed it off, said it must have been her imagination. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The attic window in the Callahan house faced directly into my bedroom. And as I lay there, trying not to let my mind wander, I saw it. A flicker, just a shadow at first. Then movement. Slow, deliberate, like someone watching from behind old lace curtains. I got up, pressed my face to the glass. Nothing. The attic was dark. Still. Empty. But the next morning, Abby told Mom she'd been playing with Ethan. She said he was lonely. That he missed his parents. That was the Callahan boy's name. I remember standing there in the kitchen, cereal spoon halfway to my mouth, as the spoon started to tremble in my hand. Mom laughed it off, too. Said Abby had a vivid imagination. But Abby had never met Ethan. She didn't know the name. And she couldn't have made up the scar on his chin, or the way he dragged his left foot. Details only someone close to him, or someone who saw him, would know. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But things escalated quickly. Fast enough that, in hindsight, we should have left before the end of that first week. It was Thursday when I heard the scratching. At first, I thought it was rats in the walls. Then I realized the sound wasn't coming from inside our house. It was coming from the Callahan place. And it wasn't random. It had rhythm, a pattern. 3 slow scratches, pause, then 1 long drag across the wall. It happened every night at exactly 2:13 a.m. I recorded it once, played it back in the morning. Nothing, just dead air. But when I listened in real time, I could hear it clear as day. Sometimes I thought I heard a whisper underneath it. Not words. More like breath. Like someone exhaling right into my ear. Then came the photographs. We found them in the backyard, buried in a tin box behind the shed. Dozens of old Polaroids, some faded almost to white. Most were of the Callahan family. Picnics, Christmas mornings, birthdays. But a few were different. One showed the family sitting on the porch. Everyone was smiling, except Ethan. He was staring straight into the camera, mouth open in what looked like a scream. Another showed him standing alone in the basement, arms raised, eyes wide with something between fear and rage. Behind him, scrawled on the concrete wall in what looked like black charcoal or dried blood, was a phrase "ITLIVSBTBNTHE Wiles." We should have burned them, but we kept them. Curiosity always wins. The town didn't like to talk about the Callahan place. Most people averted their eyes when they drove past. The few who spoke up said the house was wrong, that it grew things. Molds and vines that didn't match anything in the region. Rust that reappeared overnight even on stainless steel. walls that seemed to move just a little bit closer every time you turned your back. I asked an old man at the gas station once why they never tore it down. He just looked at me and said, "You don't dig up a grave and expect peace." I thought it was a metaphor. Now I'm not so sure. On the 10th night, Abby stopped eating. Said the food wasn't safe. That Ethan told her they put things in it. She began speaking in rhymes, muttering them under her breath in the middle of the night. We'd find her sleepwalking, standing in the hallway staring at the Callahan house. Sometimes she scratched herself. Long, jagged cuts down her arms. When we asked her why, she said it was to let it out. I remember holding her one night as she shook with fever, whispering the same phrase over and over, "It doesn't like the quiet." Then, it wasn't quiet anymore. We started hearing footsteps in our attic, not the usual creaks and groans of an old house, but full-on pacing, heavy boots, sometimes running. We'd go up with flashlights and find nothing but disturbed dust and the faint scent of burnt hair. One night, we found Abby sitting in the crawlspace, whispering into a hole in the wall. When we pulled her out, she fought like an animal, biting and scratching. When she calmed down, she said Ethan showed her a door inside the wall, that had opened when you bled into it. We took her to a doctor. He said it was stress, night terrors, recommended therapy. But that same night, I saw the door she spoke of. It was behind a loose panel in the Callahan basement. We broke in. I know, stupid, but by then I had to know. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was obsession. I had dreams of that house pulling me inside, whispering secrets it promised to tell if I just got closer. The basement was worse than I expected. The smell hit me first, mildew and copper and something old, something buried. The walls were covered in drawings, childlike scribbles of screaming faces, clawed hands, and eyes. So many eyes. Watching, always watching. Then I found it. A section of the wall that looked different. Not brick, not wood. It had a strange sheen, almost like flesh, and it pulsed. I touched it and it felt warm. That's when I heard the whisper. Not from the house. From inside me. "You've seen me now." I ran. We tried to leave town the next day. Packed up everything in a rush. But the car wouldn't start. The phones went dead. And that night, the lights in our house flickered like strobe lights before plunging into blackness. That was the night Abby disappeared. We searched everywhere. Police came. Neighbors formed search parties. But she was gone. No signs of struggle. Just her teddy bear laid gently on the porch steps, and a single word scratched into the wood beneath it, "O pen." We never found her body either. But sometimes when I pass that house, because yes, I'm still here, I swear I hear her laughing, somewhere deep inside the walls. And the attic window, it flickers. Someone is watching, and they're waiting. It started with a knock. Not loud, not frantic. Just 3 soft taps at the door sometime after midnight. I wouldn't have heard it if I hadn't been lying there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun like it could save me. My parents were passed out, exhaustion finally beating fear for once, but I hadn't slept in days. Not really. Not since Abby vanished. Not since that awful word showed up on the porch. "O pen," like a command we'd all ignored. The knock came again. I didn't want to move. I wanted to stay wrapped in my sheets, buried in the illusion that blankets could protect me. But something pulled at me. A sound, low and constant, just below the silence. It wasn't the usual creak of wood or the hum of electricity. It was more like breathing. A slow inhale and exhale coming from every wall in the house. The air felt thicker with each passing second. Still, I moved. I slipped out of bed and padded barefoot to the front door, the floorboards cold and slick under my feet. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe a police officer with some late night news. Maybe a cruel prank from a neighborhood kid. But when I opened the door, the porch was empty. The street was empty. Only the wind, curling through the trees, and the shadows stretching long and sharp under the pale slice of moon. But then, just as I began to close the door, I saw it. A smear, just beyond the porch, leading toward the woods, dark and glistening in the moonlight. Blood. I didn't think. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and ran. The beam cut jagged lines through the mist, flickering at every movement. The blood trail veered off the driveway and slithered toward the edge of the woods like a wounded snake. I followed, heart pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. 10 paces into the trees and the air changed. The scent hit me first, raw, metallic, and something else. Something sore. Like rotten fruit left out in the sun too long. The trees groaned above me as if warning me back. But I kept going. The flashlight began to fade, the beam flickering like a dying heartbeat. Then it went out completely. I stood frozen, trying to decide whether to go back or keep going blind, when I heard her. "Ethan, is that you, Abby?" It was her voice. Small, scared, just ahead. I ran. Branches clawed at my arms and face. The trees closed in tighter with every step. My breath turned ragged. Then, just ahead, a clearing. A patch of pale moonlight spilled through the trees like a spotlight. And in the center of it, something stood. It wasn't Abby. It looked like her. Same pigtails. Same pajamas with the faded cartoon bears. But her skin was too pale. Her eyes too wide, pupils blown black like ink stains. She didn't blink. Didn't speak. I stepped closer, barely able to whisper. "Abby." Her head twitched. Just a little. Like a puppet yanked on a weak string. "I missed you," she said. Her voice didn't match her mouth. It came from everywhere. Behind me, above me, inside my head. Then she smiled. Her teeth were wrong. Too many. Too sharp. I took a step back, and she screamed. It wasn't human. It was a sound pulled from the depths of some ancient thing that had never known language, just hunger and fury and pain. It tore through me like glass. I turned and ran, crashing through branches and vines, until the porch light of our house came into view. I didn't look back. I slammed the door behind me and slid to the floor, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't even hold the flashlight. It flickered back to life for a second, casting a faint beam onto the hallway wall. And there, where there had been nothing before, was a message, scratched deep into the drywall. "Say she's us naughty o urs air more," I screamed. My parents came running, half asleep and frantic. I tried to explain, but the scratches were gone. The wall was smooth, untouched. They didn't believe me. Said it was grief. Said I was seeing things. But something had changed in the house. The air never quite settled. Doors opened on their own. Lights flickered even after the bulbs were changed. And then there were the pictures. Family photos on the hallway wall began to shift. At first, it was subtle. A background detail missing. A smile just slightly off. But then it escalated. One morning, I noticed Abby's eyes were completely black in every photo. Not red from flash. Not closed. Just black. 2 days later, she was gone from all of them. Every picture. Every frame. As if she had never existed. We called the police. They searched the house again, searched the woods again, but nothing turned up. This time, no one offered hope. No one said she'd be found. The officers left without meeting my eyes. But I knew. Something had taken her. Something that lived in that house next door. Something old and hungry and angry, and it wasn't finished. That night, I sat in the dark with a notebook and a pen. I started writing down everything. Every sound, every shadow, every whisper. I had to hold on to something real, something mine. But even the notebook betrayed me. Words began appearing on pages I hadn't written. Ugly, jagged handwriting. Doar. Bill Ode. Haspurn. It wrote that phrase 100 times, page after page. My name disappeared from the cover. Instead, it read Ehanans Journal. That's when I remembered something. A story I overheard at school. A rumor, dismissed by most, whispered by a few. That Ethan hadn't just disappeared. That he'd been opened up. That they found carvings all over his room. That his voice still echoed through the pipes, calling to others. A kid in my grade said he once saw a face in the sink drain. Another claimed his sister was dragged down through the floorboards during a sleepover. No one ever told the same story twice, but they all ended the same way. Missing, forgotten, like they never existed. That's what the house did. It didn't just take people, it erased them. That realization hit me hard. I was next, unless I could stop it. But how do you fight something you can't see? Something older than memory? I turned to the photos again, looked closer. In the corner of one, almost too faint to notice, I spotted something, behind our old shed just past the trees. A shape, too tall, too thin. Its face blurred like a smudge on the lens. I went out there the next morning. I found the exact spot. The grass was dead. The dirt underneath felt loose. I started digging. 3 feet down, I found a small box. Old wood, rusted hinges. Inside was a strip of cloth, faded, a bloody, a tooth, a child's shoe, and a note it feeds on memory. Do not forget, do not sleep, do not let it in. I looked up. The house next door had its curtains pulled back. The attic window was wide open. And behind the glass, eyes, not human, watching, waiting. And then, clear as day, I heard Abby's voice one more time. This time from the vent above my bed, let me out. But it wasn't a plea, it was a dare. It began with names disappearing. At first, it was small things. My school books no longer had my name scrawled inside. The attendance list no longer called for Daniel Matthews. Teachers paused, confused, and skipped over the blank space where my name used to be. I asked one of them why I wasn't listed. She blinked at me like I was speaking gibberish and said, "You must be new. What's your name again?" That night, I dug through the family photo albums. Every birthday, every vacation, every Christmas morning, I wasn't there. Not in a single picture. My mother had kept meticulous albums, dozens of them lined on the bookshelf. And I was gone from all of them. Not just faded, removed. Like someone had snipped me out with surgical precision and sealed the space shut. Even my room felt less mine. Posters were missing from the walls. My clothes weren't in the drawers. The bed creaked in a way it never had before, like it was groaning under the weight of forgetting. And my parents? God, my parents. They looked at me like they were trying to remember something that hovered just out of reach. I tested it. Sat at the breakfast table and asked my dad what grade I was in. He blinked, shrugged, told me to ask my mother. She spilled coffee on herself and didn't even flinch. That was when I realized what the house was really doing. It wasn't just taking people. It was scratching them out, not killing, not kidnapping. No. It was erasing them from the world so completely that they only survived in the scraps they buried deep. The things they wrote down, the thoughts they refused to let go of. I still remembered Abby because I wrote about her, because I whispered her name every night like a prayer, like an anchor. But it was getting harder. The words in my notebook began to blur. Pages tore on their own. Some mornings, whole entries were gone, just ripped clean away as if they'd never existed. I started hiding copies. Wrote down everything I could recall about Abby and shoved the papers under floorboards, inside books, behind outlets. I wrote her name on my arm in permanent marker. I taped it behind my headboard. I carved it into the inside of my sneaker soles. If I could just keep remembering, maybe I could fight it. But then something changed in the Callahan house. The attic window, which had always been cracked just enough to peer through, was wide open. For the first time in weeks, there was movement, not just flickers, but full figures gliding past, silhouettes that didn't match any human shape. I watched one of them drag a hand across the glass. A long, clawed hand that left no prints, only moisture. The smell came next, thick, sweet, rancid, like syrup left to rot in the sun. It filled the air between our homes, clung to our porch, our laundry, our clothes. My mom noticed. She blamed the drains, the garbage, the neighbors. But no matter how much she cleaned, the smell got worse. She took showers that lasted an hour, scrubbing her arms raw. My dad walked around with Vicks smeared under his nose, like he was dealing with corpses. They never talked about it directly. But I could see it, the exhaustion setting in. The way they'd both stare at empty spaces in the room like something was supposed to be there. Like they felt the holes growing in their minds, but were too scared to ask what had been there in the first place. One night, I tried to jog their memory. I brought out a photo of Abby. It was the only one I had left, and it was fading more each day. I placed it in front of them and waited. Mom squinted, tilted her head. She stared for a long time before saying, "She looks familiar." Then she began to cry. Not loud, just quiet tears, like her body remembered what her mind couldn't. Dad just walked away. And that was the moment I knew, soon I'd be next. The house had started its work on me. I saw it in the mirror. How my reflection twitched a second too slow, like it was thinking of pulling away. Sometimes I'd blink and swear the room behind me shifted. Walls leaning just a hair too far inward. Shadows stretching when they shouldn't. Then came the banging. It started from inside our walls. Loud, sudden, a single thud like something massive had thrown itself against the plaster. Then again, and again, until the pictures rattled and the lamps shook. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a flashlight, and followed the sound. It moved, first to the living room, then upstairs, then back to the kitchen. It wasn't a mouse. It wasn't a raccoon. It was following me, hunting me through my own home. The banging stopped just outside my bedroom door. The knob jiggled, scraped. Then silence. I leaned in, held my breath. A whisper came through the wood. Not Abby's voice. Not Ethan's. Something else. Open. It was so clear, I felt the breath of it on my cheek. I backed away slowly, nearly tripping over a loose shoe. My heart thundered so loud it drowned out the world. I slammed my shoulder into the door and locked it. Then I turned and froze. My walls were covered in writing, scratched deep into the plaster, like fingernails had carved it over and over. Open he doar, open he doar, open the doar, each line slightly different, some large, some slanted, some practically gouged into the surface. I ran to my notebook to see if I had written in my sleep. The pages were blank. My name was gone again. But there was one note left on the final page. A different handwriting. She's behind the mirror. I turned, slowly, toward the mirror above my dresser. I'd avoided looking into it for days, ever since my reflection had smiled when I hadn't. I approached carefully, flashlight trembling in my grip. The surface rippled, just for a second, as if it were water. Then I saw her. Not her reflection. Her Abby, pressed against the other side of the glass. Hands flat against it, mouth open in a silent scream. Her eyes were wide black and full of tears. She mouthed something, over and over. "Let me out. Let me out." Then something yanked her backward. A black shape, long-limbed, faceless, gripped her by the throat and dragged her into the darkness behind the mirror. Her hands left smeared streaks across the inside of the glass. Then, nothing. Just my own face staring back at me. I punched the mirror. It cracked, shattered. Blood smeared the frame. But behind the glass was only wall. No opening, no passage. Just silence. And the next morning, my mother didn't know who I was. Not in the "oh, you scared me" way. Not even the "you've changed" way. She stared at me like I was a stranger in her kitchen. Like I had broken in and stolen her son's face. I tried calling her mom, but she flinched. My father told me to leave, voice tight, eyes hollow. I ran to my room, packed what little I had left, the notebook, the photo, a handful of clothes, and I left. But I didn't go far. I went back to the only place I knew the house couldn't ignore. The Callahan place. If it wanted me, it could have me. But this time, I'd go in on my terms. This time, I'd find Abby. This time, I'd open the door. The Callahan house wasn't a ruin. It was a lie. That was the first thing I realized when I stepped inside. From the street, it looked broken. Windows boarded up. Paint peeling. A crumbling porch daring you to try the front steps. But the moment I crossed the threshold, something shifted. The inside was intact. Not pristine, but not abandoned either. The air was too still. The floorboards, though dusty, didn't creak. And the walls, they breathed. I know how that sounds, but I felt it. Every time I stood still long enough, a draft would brush past me, like the house was inhaling through its floorboards and exhaling through its vents. I closed the door behind me, and it sealed with a softness that felt deliberate, like the house was welcoming me. I didn't speak, didn't dare. Even the sound of my own breathing felt too loud. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was waiting, watching, as though sound might wake something still slumbering just beneath the wood. I turned on my flashlight, but the beam barely touched the dark. The hallway stretched deeper than I remembered. When I passed through it, every picture frame lining the wall had been turned to face inward. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe. I stopped at one, flipped it around. It was Abby, her face blurry but recognizable. Not from any moment I remembered. This wasn't a birthday or Christmas. She was standing in a hallway I didn't know, mouth slightly open, as if whispering something to the person taking the photo. I turned another, and another, more pictures of her. Each one darker, her face less visible, her eyes blackening frame by frame. By the fifth one there was no face, just hair. Then, in the next, not even that, just the outline of a dress, like she was fading from the pictures in reverse. They weren't pictures of her. They were pictures capturing her. The hallway opened into a living room. Every piece of furniture was covered in white sheets, and on each sheet, a symbol was drawn in ash. Crude circles, spirals, scratches that bled into one another until they stopped making sense. On the coffee table lay a child's shoe, Abby's. The same one I'd seen in the tin box behind our shed, only this time it was warm, like it had been worn recently. I didn't touch it. I didn't touch anything. I went upstairs instead, toward the attic. The steps groaned under my weight, not like a normal creak, more like a groan of resistance, like something deep in the bones of the house knew where I was going and didn't want me there. But I kept climbing. At the top, the attic door waited. A narrow panel of warped wood with no handle. Just a keyhole. I didn't have a key. I pressed my ear to the wood. From the other side came a low scratching sound. Not frantic, just constant, like nails gently dragging across stone. I knocked once, unsure why, and the scratching stopped. Then a voice answered, not Abby's, not Ethan's. A woman, calm, measured, almost kind. Do you know your name? She asked. The question cut through me. Yes, I thought. Of course I did. But when I tried to speak it aloud, nothing came. Not a stutter, not a whisper. Nothing. Names are seeds, the voice continued. They grow roots. If something eats the roots, you forget the tree. I tried again. Forced the name through clenched teeth, and failed. Panic welled up in my chest. I was forgetting myself. Every second in this house was cutting pieces off of me. First the photos, then the school records, then my family. Now even my name. I needed to get inside, needed to see her. Abby, before she was gone too, before I was. But the door stayed shut. Do you want to open it? The voice asked. Yes, I croaked. Then trade. Trade what? The scratching resumed. Louder now. Faster. Something you remember, she said. Something true. It came to me then. A memory. Abby's 7th birthday. The way she'd cried because her cake was chocolate and not vanilla. How she smeared frosting on my face to punish me because she thought I'd picked it. How she laughed when I slipped and fell into the kiddie pool, trying to chase her. That laugh. I love that laugh. I give you her laugh, I whispered. The keyhole clicked. The door swung open. The attic was nothing like I expected. It didn't even look like part of the same house. The air was wet and cold. The walls black and pulsing. The floor felt spongy under my feet, as if I were standing on some kind of muscle, not wood. Every surface shimmered like oil on water, and something whispered from every direction. I walked in slowly. The door closed behind me. In the center of the attic stood a mirror, not hung, just standing there, tall and old, its frame wrapped in barbed wire, and in the glass, not my reflection, Abby's. She stood with her forehead pressed against the other side, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Her hands were red, her eyes wept black tears, but she saw me, and she smiled. Then something pulled her backward. The same shape as before, long, stretched, featureless. It curled around her like smoke. As she vanished into the dark of the mirror, something stepped out of it. Not Abby, not human. A shape that borrowed the idea of a girl. It stepped onto the attic floor with a wet squelch and stared at me with hollow eyes. No mouth, no nose. Just eyes that stretched too far across its skull. When it spoke, the sound came from my own throat. You traded her laugh. It wasn't a question. You gave her away. I backed up. I want her back, I said. The thing tilted its head, bird-like. Curious. Cruel. Then trade again. I didn't ask what it wanted. I knew. The thing reached into my chest without touching me. I felt it digging through my ribs, pulling something loose. It took my first kiss. My father's voice. The warmth of a summer day spent playing hide and seek with Abby behind our house. Gone. All of it. I screamed. Not because of pain, but because of emptiness. Then, just like that, it stepped back into the mirror and disappeared. And Abby stood on the attic floor, real, breathing, crying. She ran to me, wrapped her arms around me. You came, she sobbed. You remembered. I held her close. But something in me knew. This wasn't over. The attic door creaked open behind us. Light spilled in from the hallway. We left the house together, hand in hand. But as we walked down the porch steps, I looked back. And in the attic window, she was still there. The other Abby, smiling, waiting. And the door had no keyhole anymore, only a mouth. And it whispered my name, the name I still couldn't remember. The morning light did nothing to warm me. It felt artificial, like a stage lamp casting a glow that didn't belong. Abby walked beside me, small and silent, her hand tucked into mine, as we made our way down Wickersham Road. Her fingers were cold. Not the kind of cold you shake off with friction or gloves. This was something deeper. A cold that settled in your bones and waited. No cars passed us. No birds sang. The neighborhood was motionless, like someone had paused the world just to let us walk through it. She hadn't spoken since we left the attic. At first, I thought she was in shock. But the longer we walked, the more I felt it. That subtle weight in her presence, like she was too still. Her eyes didn't flick around like they used to. She didn't glance at the flowers, the mailboxes, the cracks in the sidewalk. She just walked. Eyes ahead, straight posture. Like someone marching to a rhythm no one else could hear. We got home. Or what was left of it. Our house looked the same, but it felt different. Emptier. My mother was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. My father sat in his recliner, watching a blank television screen, nodding as if some invisible dialogue was feeding him lines. I stepped inside. Abby stayed on the porch. "Mom," I said carefully, "I found her. I found Abby." She didn't turn around. "Mom." She dipped a spoon into a bowl that had nothing in it, brought it to her mouth, chewed air, swallowed. When I stepped closer, I saw it. Her eyes were cloudy, a film like dust over glass. Her lips moved, forming silent words. Her hands trembled as she pretended to eat. "Dad," I called. He didn't respond either, just nodded at the television. Every few seconds, he'd raise an invisible remote and press a button that didn't exist. His hand trembled too. A fly landed on his cheek. He didn't blink. The house had done something to them. Not taken them, but suspended them, like puppets left out too long. Their souls wrung dry of memory, their bodies still going through the motions. I backed out of the kitchen and shut the front door. Abby stood exactly where I'd left her, still holding my hand even though I'd stepped away. I stared at her, finally saying what I hadn't dared to voice since we left the Callahan place. "Are you real?" She didn't answer, but her eyes shimmered for the first time. Moisture, tears, a small sign of life. She took a breath, shaky. shallow, and nodded. I think so. I wanted to believe her. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't forget the other Abby. The one that had watched from the attic window with that twisted smile. I remembered the thing that had mimicked her voice in the woods. The shifting photos. The girl-shaped shadow with hollow eyes. I had seen too many versions of her to trust anyone completely. We didn't go back into the house. Instead, we sat on the curb, not saying much. She leaned against me like she used to when we watched fireworks in the summer. When she was tired but refused to go inside because she didn't want to miss the finale. Eventually, she whispered, "It still watches." I didn't need to ask what she meant. I felt it too. The Callahan house. Even from across the street, I could feel it. The attic window was closed now. But that didn't matter. The house didn't need an open window to look at you. It watched from cracks, from reflections, from inside your head. They don't forget, she added. Who? The things that live in the walls. Her voice had changed again, a little deeper, a little too measured for her age. I looked at her sideways, unsure whether to ask what she meant, but she continued before I could. They remember everything you want to forget. That's how they live. Feeding on scraps you try to bury. Shame, guilt, secrets. How do you know? I was with them for a long time. She turned her face to me, and for a moment I didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked older. Worn. Eyes that had seen more than 9 years of life should ever endure. They didn't hurt me, she said softly. Not the way you think. They showed me. Every time someone goes missing, every memory erased, every name swallowed, they keep pieces. Why? She shrugged. To remember? That's what they are. Memories that rot. I didn't understand it. Not fully. But I didn't press her. There was something fragile about her now. Like too many questions would break the part of her that still belonged here. That night, we stayed in the backyard. I didn't want to sleep in the house. I set up an old tent from the garage, the kind we used for camping when Dad still remembered what that meant. I brought snacks, flashlights, blankets. We sat together under the fabric roof, pretending we were miles away. Safe. Hidden. But the house found us anyway. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I woke to the sound of scratching. It wasn't from the tent. It came from under us. The earth. I pressed my ear to the ground, and it was there. 3 scratches, pause, then a long, slow drag. The same pattern. The same sound I'd heard from the Callahan walls. Abby sat up too. They're digging, she whispered. For what? She didn't answer. I grabbed the flashlight and unzipped the tent. The backyard was bathed in sickly moonlight. The shed looked different, taller, somehow. Leaning forward, I stepped out into the grass and froze. There were holes, shallow, fresh, all across the yard, as if something had been clawing its way out. One hole had something in it. A photograph. I picked it up. It was me, not smiling, not posing, just standing in the middle of the street, alone, eyes hollow. I flipped it over. 4 words scratched into the back, "W-E-FAR go, U-F-I-R-S-T. I dropped it, turned, and saw them. Figures, tall, gaunt, bent at angles that broke logic, standing at the edges of the yard. Dozens of them, all staring. Not moving, just watching. They weren't ghosts. They weren't people. They were memories with bones, the things that remembered, the ones who hadn't been forgotten. I grabbed Abby's hand, but she didn't move. She looked at them, then at me. I think I have to go back. No, I said, panicked. We got out. You're here. You're safe. She shook her head. I'm only here because you traded. I'm not whole. I'm just a piece you kept. They want the rest. I held onto her tighter. You're staying with me. We'll run. We'll leave town. Run where? She asked gently. They live in forgetting. Every time someone lets go, they grow. You can't outrun that. The figures began to move. Not fast. Just slowly closing in. Gliding over the ground like they didn't need to touch it. I looked down at Abby. She was fading. I saw my own hand through hers. No, I whispered. Please. She smiled. The same crooked smile from that summer day by the kiddie pool. And then she whispered something I'll never forget, because I wrote it down that night on every surface I could find. Just remember me loud enough to keep them away. And she was gone. The backyard was empty. The holes were filled. The photograph in my hand turned blank. Only the scratches on my arms, her name written again and again, remained. So I remember, every day, because I know now. The moment I forget her completely, they'll come for me next. I stopped sleeping after that night. Not just because I was afraid, though I was, but because I couldn't risk it. Every time I closed my eyes for more than a few minutes, I found myself back there, not in a dream, not really, in rooms, endless ones. Shifting halls with no windows and doors that never opened the same way twice. It was like the Callahan house had moved in behind my eyes. Like its bones had stretched through memory and made themselves a nest in the quiet corners of my mind. Even wide awake, I saw flashes of it. Reflections in the microwave. Shadows that didn't match the furniture. Patterns in the carpet, I swear, rearranged themselves when I blinked. But the worst part, the room I was in never stayed the same. It started subtle. One morning, my bedroom window faced west instead of east. But I thought I'd just gotten turned around in the dark. But when I checked the sun's position, it wasn't a mistake. Then, the doorframe changed. Slightly taller. A groove in the wood that hadn't been there the night before. My posters disappeared one by one. Drawers were deeper. My pillow heavier. Each morning I woke up in a version of my room that was just slightly wrong, and no one noticed. Not my parents. Though I'd stopped thinking of them as mine. They walked and spoke like flesh, covered recordings. They never looked at me for more than a few seconds. They smiled too long, laughed a beat too late. Sometimes they'd stop mid-sentence, eyes locked on nothing, like a thought had short-circuited. I tested them. Told them I'd been in the woods. Told them Abby was back, then gone again. Told them about the things in the walls. They nodded. They smiled. And then one day they responded. Not in words. I was eating toast, if it was even toast. It tasted more like dust and static. When my mother turned to me and said, "There's a door under the stairs you've never opened." Her voice was her voice. But it wasn't. It was like someone had wound up an old tape of her and let it play in slow motion. "There's a what?" I asked. But she had gone back to smiling, her eyes distant again. I hadn't thought about that door in years. It was always locked, always cold to the touch. I'd asked once when I was a kid what was behind it. Dad told me it was just storage. I never saw them open it. Never saw a key. That night, I went to it. It felt different now. The air in the hallway leaned into me. Not a breeze, pressure. Like the walls were pushing me toward it. I reached for the handle, half expecting it to vanish when I touched it. But it didn't. It turned easily, and the door creaked open. A staircase wound downward. Not to the basement, no. Our basement door was on the other side of the house. This was something else, something deeper. It didn't smell like earth. It smelled like dusty breath. I turned on my flashlight and stepped down, 1 foot at a time, expecting the air to grow cooler. It didn't. It grew warmer. Thicker, like walking into a mouth. The stairs ended at a hallway I had never seen before. At first glance, it looked normal. Beige wallpaper, faded rug, old light fixtures that swayed despite no wind. But the pictures on the walls weren't ours. They were mine. Every hallway led to more of me. Me at school, me in the yard, me brushing my teeth, sleeping, staring out windows. But I had never posed for these. They weren't taken by anyone I knew. They were taken when I was alone, and none of them had my eyes right. In every photo, my eyes were just slightly off. Too wide. Looking past the camera, not into it. Like I knew I was being watched, but didn't want to meet its gaze. One door waited at the end of the hallway. Unlike the rest, this one wasn't wood. It was metal. Old. Rusted. Bolted down with 7 locks, only one of which looked undone. I reached for the bolt, and the moment my fingers touched it, I remembered something I wasn't supposed to. I was 6. Abby was 3. We'd been playing hide and seek. I found her in the coat closet, laughing, giddy, unafraid. But there was something else in there, too, behind her, watching. A shape pressed into the coats, a stretch of black between sleeves that didn't match any jacket we owned. I remembered running. I remembered never speaking of it again. Until now, that moment had been gone. Deleted. The house had taken it. But now it gave it back. A gift. Or a warning. Either way, it made my stomach twist. I stepped back from the metal door, turned around, and found myself no longer in my house. I was standing in the Callahan hallway. Same wallpaper. Same cracked floorboards. Only now it stretched in both directions like a maze, bending impossibly, rooms doubling back on themselves. Each door had a name on it, not labels, names, scratched in with shaky, desperate hands. Some were half faded, some blood fresh, and some had no name at all, just an outline, as if the name had been carved out and taken away. I ran, not because I thought I could escape, but because it was the only instinct I had left. Each door I passed whispered as I moved. Some begged, some laughed. One simply screamed. Then I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard since Abby vanished. The laugh, her laugh, it echoed from behind one of the nameless doors, small, giddy. The kind of sound she only made when she was about to scare me, or had pulled off a trick, or... I turned the handle. The room inside was empty. No furniture, no windows, just 4 walls and the faint outline of a trapdoor on the ceiling. Something dripped onto my shoulder. I looked up. A face was staring down through the crack in the ceiling. Abby's, only her mouth was sewn shut. The stitches pulsed, and as I watched, the threads began to rip, 1, then 2. Then the mouth opened and she whispered. They let me out. But they kept the others. Others? I asked. But she was already gone, and the trapdoor had vanished. I was alone in a room with no door, no exit, no light. Just walls that moved closer when I blinked. I sat down in the center, tried to remember her laugh again. I wrote her name in the dust with my finger. Again, 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 because if I forgot her, they'd take me too. But when I opened my eyes, the dust had rearranged itself. Now it read IULADD, and the room was smaller. The walls were breathing again. Each inhale pressed closer. Each exhale barely retreated. The space I sat in was closing, not in some panicked metaphor, but in slow, crushing reality, like the room itself had decided I didn't need space anymore. I couldn't see the corners now. The darkness was too thick, too textured, like it had weight, a velvet, black pressure that licked against my skin and tasted me. It felt like being swallowed alive by the house, inch by inch, breath by stolen breath. I tried not to blink. Every time I did, the room shrank another half-inch. The name I'd scratched into the dust, Abby, was gone now. Not smeared. Gone. Like the dust itself had rejected it. Like the house had decided it didn't belong anymore. I started whispering her name. Over and over. A chant. A shield. But the echo that came back wasn't mine. It was lower. Rougher. Wrong. A twisted reflection of my voice, distorted by something that had heard too many names and worn too many faces. The floor beneath me vibrated softly, then started to pulse. Not from machinery, not from plumbing. It pulsed to a heartbeat, but not mine, not human. A slow, heavy thud that carried weight. Like the foundation of the house had a living organ, and I was now inside its chest cavity. And then, through the dark, a sliver of light. Thin as thread, but there. A door frame. Not a door, just a frame, floating in the darkness, pulsing with the rhythm of the floor. It looked like a window cut through shadows. No wall supported it. It stood upright, impossible. Glowing faintly with the kind of gray, blue light that only comes right before dawn. I didn't trust it. But it was all I had. I crawled toward it. The room didn't like that. The breathing quickened. The walls quivered. A low, wet groan rolled through the space around me like someone had just woken up from centuries of sleep and wasn't happy to find company. I moved faster. The closer I got, the colder the light became. It wasn't comforting, it was clinical, sterile. The kind of light that fills morgues and interrogation rooms. A light that doesn't care what it reveals. I reached the frame and pulled myself through, and the world turned inside out. There was no ceiling, no floor, no sky, just endless frames hanging in space, like a forest made of doors, all suspended over nothing. Some were closed, some open, some led to stairs. Others opened into windows. A few just floated, doorless and waiting. Behind me, the room I came from had vanished. In its place was a new frame. This one was cracked, with bits of dark red smeared across the top corner, too dark for paint, and inside it I saw something move. A face, my face, it smiled. Then it turned and walked away, into the frame, leaving me standing outside of myself. That was when I heard the murmuring, faint, all around. Voices bleating from every open doorway. Some begged for help, some whispered confessions, some just screamed. But all of them familiar, because they were all mine. Things I had said, things I had almost said, things I'd buried. Don't tell Mom. Abby, if you tell, it's not my fault. I didn't see her fall. Fragments of memories I hadn't dared revisit, and they were all echoing back, louder, more solid. These doors weren't escape routes. They were mirrors, and the house had dragged me into its memory. I chose one, any one, to escape the rising tide of voices. A simple red door, half open, with a child's handprint smeared on it, inside Abby's bedroom. But not as I remembered it. This was before. Her crib still sat in the corner. Her stuffed animals were new, bright. The walls were a soft yellow, untainted by the shadows that had crept in later. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, sound returned. The house began to live again. A lullaby played from an unseen music box. The walls whispered a name, Abby, again and again, lovingly at first, then faster, more frantic, until it sounded like a warning. A mobile spun above the crib. I walked toward it, compelled by something I didn't understand. And that's when I saw them. Scrawled along the ceiling, barely visible under the pastel paint, Lioftt door open. I backed away, confused. What door? Then the lullaby stopped, the room dimmed, and a noise began behind me, slow, dragging like nails across wet linoleum. I turned, expecting something monstrous. But it was her, toddler Abby, barefoot, crying, holding her teddy bear by one ear. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes were swollen. She pointed toward the closet. I opened it. Inside there was no back wall, no floor, just darkness that stretched down into forever. And from it, a voice I never wanted to hear again. You saw me once, and you turned away. It was him, the shape from the coat closet, the one behind the coats. Only now, it wasn't hiding. It stepped out of the void on hands too long, legs bent backwards, and a neck that hung like a broken doll's. Its face, if it was a face, was a mask of shifting features, a rotating blur of every person I'd failed. Abby, Mom, Dad, me. It didn't speak again. It just moved forward, fast. I grabbed Abby and ran, back through the bedroom, through the red door, into the frame, space again. I didn't stop, picked a new door. Green this time, wooden handle. We crashed through, into darkness again. A hallway this time, ours, but empty. Dust coated everything. Photos on the wall were blank. No smiles, no people. Just scenery. The air was cold, too quiet. I ran to the kitchen. No one. No Mom. No Dad. Only a note, handwritten in a scrawl that didn't match anything I knew. You left the door open. Same phrase. Over and over. Etched into the table. Into the fridge door. Into the walls. You left the door open. And then the lights went out. Something stood behind me. Breathing. I didn't turn. Couldn't. Instead, I picked up the teddy bear from Abby's arms and held it tight. And whispered, we never closed it. Behind me, the breathing stopped, and the house laughed. Not loudly. Worse. It laughed like us, like my mother, like Abby, like me. The house remembered, and now, so did I. The laughter didn't echo, it lingered. thick and sticky, like cobwebs clinging to the inside of my ears. It followed us through every step of the dark hallway, weaving itself into the floorboards, the light switches, even the silence. This wasn't just the sound of something amused. It was a memory-given voice. My voice. It laughed with all the wrong notes. Times I mocked Abby. Moments I spoke under my breath. Each snide comment I thought had vanished into nothing. It remembered everything I ever said in weakness. And now, it wore those sounds like a skin. The teddy bear in my hand, Abby's, felt heavier than it should. As if it was more than just fabric and stuffing. As if it too had remembered where it had once been buried. When I squeezed it, something inside shifted. Not a rattle, not a squeak, but a dull thud, like a second heartbeat pressed against mine. I didn't tell Abby. I didn't ask if she noticed. I didn't want to know what else had come back with us. The hallway ended at the front door, or what looked like it. But there was no knob, no hinges, no crack around the frame, just the shape of a door, drawn in thin lines across the wall, like someone had traced where it used to be with a shaking hand. Above it, something was carved, not words, not even symbols, but scratches, long, sharp, angry. It looked like someone, or something, had tried to claw its way in or out. Abby stood to my right, her face pale, her lips pressed into a flat line that didn't belong on a child. She reached out, touched the door's outline, and whispered, "It's not locked. It's just waiting." "For what?" I asked, her eyes flicked to mine. For us to remember why we closed it. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because I didn't remember. Not clearly. Only flashes, dull and bent like watching memories through water. There was a door. There was a time we sealed it. But I couldn't recall when. Or why. Or what we'd seen before slamming it shut. I placed my palm on the surface. It felt alive. A heartbeat, slow and steady, pressed back against mine. Not threatening. Not yet. Just present. Waiting, like Abby said. Waiting for someone to make the choice. To speak the word. To open it again. Behind us, the hallway flickered. The walls twisted. Stretched. The floor rippled like liquid. I turned. The house was changing again. Becoming something else. Rooms realigned. Doors melted into each other. The staircase unraveled and twisted upward into a spiral that went nowhere. The living room cracked open, revealing a hallway that shouldn't have existed, and from that impossible corridor came the first scream. Low, gurgling, familiar. It was my father's voice, only he wasn't calling for help. He was laughing. It started soft, like the broken chuckle of someone who's gone too long without company. Then louder, frenzied, the sound of a man unraveling. Each syllable was dipped in madness. It didn't come from his mouth. It came from the house, spoken through its bones. Then came my mother. Her voice wasn't laughing. She was singing. Soft lullabies, fractured by static. Lyrics I recognized but couldn't name. She sang the way she used to when I was sick. Only now, her voice dragged behind itself, out of sync, like a corrupted recording. I knew what the house was doing. It was playing memories I couldn't trust anymore. It was showing me a version of them, warped, hollowed out. Things I'd loved, things I'd forgotten. Twisted just enough to plant doubt. The more I listened, the harder it was to remember what they really sounded like. "Don't listen," Abby said. But it was too late. I turned and saw them. My parents, standing at the end of the broken hallway. Only they weren't them. Not anymore. Their heads tilted too far to one side. Their eyes completely white. Their mouths stretched wide, frozen in expressions that didn't shift or blink. They weren't walking. They were gliding. Each step left a smear of black across the floor, something thick, tar-like. They raised their arms toward me and spoke in perfect unison. "You left the door open." I grabbed Abby's hand and backed into the space where the door outline waited. The wall behind us breathed. The heartbeat was louder now, almost frantic. I looked to Abby. "We have to open it." She didn't answer. She was crying. Silent tears rolled down her face, leaving behind trails too pale. Her eyes were wide, focused on the figures advancing. Her lip trembled. I remember now, she whispered. What? She turned her face to me slowly. Why we closed the door. Her voice wasn't hers anymore. It was older. Not in age, but in time. It had weight. Layers. Like she was speaking for more than just herself. Because we saw what comes through when it opens. And the moment she said it, the wall behind us cracked. Not fully. Just a sliver. A thin fracture split from the top of the outline to the bottom. And through it, I saw light. But not daylight. Not fire. Something in between. A light that didn't warm. That didn't blind. A light that stripped. I saw shadows move behind it. Dozens. Hundreds. All watching. All waiting. The door had never been a seal. It was a mirror. And every time we remembered what was behind it, the crack widened. A whisper came through. Not loud. Not clear. But sharp. It sliced through the space between us and curled around my ear. Come back. My father's voice. Then my mother's, we remember you. Then my own, you wanted us to forget. The wall behind us groaned, and the crack widened further. Light bled into the room. Abby screamed. The sound was real. Hers, sharp and terrified. I turned, and my parents were gone. In their place stood two things, tall and boneless, wearing their skin like costumes too loose at the seams. Their faces melted and reformed, mouths stuck open in permanent grins. The sound of their movement wasn't footsteps. It was scraping, like raw meat dragging across tile. They reached for us. The crack behind me tore wide, and I saw everything. A staircase. Wooden. Familiar. The night we closed the door, I was holding Abby. She was screaming. Something was crawling up the stairs behind us, screaming our names in our own voices. We weren't running from something else. We were running from us. From the other versions the house had made, the copies it built from memory scraps. We reached the door. We slammed it shut, and we forgot. Not because we were made to, because we chose to, because remembering meant they would know where to find us. I stared into the light. The memory didn't disappear. This time it stayed, and I understood. I turned back to the wall, back to the thing wearing my father's face, and whispered, "You're not them." It hissed. The light behind me flared. The door opened, and something else stepped through. Not a shadow, not a copy. Me, but not this me. Not now. Me, as I was that night, terrified, crying. A child, clutching a screaming Abby, eyes wild with fear. He stared at me and said, "You never closed it." The door slammed shut, the wall sealed. The hallway fell into silence, and when I turned back, Abby was gone. So was the house. I stood in my front yard, the grass wet with morning dew, my hands empty. No bear, no blood, no cracks. Just one thing left in the dirt beside me. A small note, written in my own handwriting. You remember now. It's your turn to watch the door. The note was damp, corners curling in the morning humidity, ink smudged as though it had been written in a rush, or by shaking hands. I didn't remember writing it, but I knew it was mine. Every loop, every break in the lines. The way I didn't quite close the O in door. It was me. Maybe a past me. Maybe one I hadn't met yet. But the intent was clear. I wasn't just another survivor of the house now. I was its caretaker, its watchman, the one who remembered. The words echoed in my head like a promise carved in bone. It's your turn to watch the door. I sat in the grass, numb, as the neighborhood came back to life around me. Or, more accurately, the idea of life. Lawnmowers buzzed, dogs barked. Sprinklers whirred, but none of it felt real. It was like I was watching a projection from behind glass. The colors too soft, the sounds too muted. And the people, those who passed by, didn't look at me, not out of rudeness. It was as if they couldn't see me at all. I went back into the house, half expecting the world inside to be twisted again. But everything looked exactly as it had before that first knock, that first flicker in the attic. The same family photos on the wall, the same breakfast dishes in the sink, the same crooked rug in the hallway. But then I looked closer. One photo, me and Abby at the lake, had changed. It was subtle, a small thing. I was still in it. But she was now just a blur, not smudged, not faded. Blurred, like a camera had tried to catch her and failed. Her face melted into the trees behind her, indistinguishable from the background. I took the photo off the wall and flipped it over. Nothing on the back. No date, no scribbled note in my mom's handwriting. I checked the others. The same. All memories of her were disintegrating. The house hadn't finished. It had paused. And it was waiting for me to decide what came next. I went to the attic. I hadn't been back since we pulled her out, or the part of her that wanted to leave. The steps creaked under my weight, not in fear, but in recognition, like they knew who I was now. The attic was clean, no pulsing walls, no flickering mirror, just a single chair in the middle of the floor, facing the far wall where the window once opened to the Callahan house. But the window was bricked up now, seamless, like it had never existed. On the chair sat a journal, leather-bound, familiar. I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of notes, sketches, maps of hallways that bent at impossible angles. Names, symbols. Crossed out theories about time and memory and space. The kind of frantic, obsessed work of someone who had lived in the house too long. Some pages were written in my hand. Others were not. Then I saw the last page. It was blank. Except for one sentence, written in bold. Sharp ink, if the house forgets you, it keeps you. If you forget it, it follows you. I read the line again, and again, until the words felt like blood on my tongue. That was the truth then. It wasn't about escape. It never was. The house isn't a place. It's a wound. A split in something bigger than any one of us. And it attaches itself to the people who see it, who name it, who dare to say it aloud. The moment you remember it, it plants a root, and if you try to forget, if you bury it, deny it, pretend it was never real, it doesn't shrink. It spreads, like rot under paint, like mold in the foundation. It follows. I closed the journal and placed it back on the chair. Then I walked back downstairs and did what I should have done from the beginning. I opened the basement door. It groaned with reluctance, as though even the house didn't want me going down there. But I had to see. I had to know what had become of the place we'd run from. The place where the door first whispered, where the deal had been struck, where Abby had been taken. The steps spiraled down, longer than I remembered, deeper than the structure of the house should allow. And when I reached the bottom, I didn't find darkness. I found a room full of light, but not warm light, not comforting. It was clinical, sterile, bright enough to make your head hurt, your thoughts scatter. The walls were white and smooth and windowless, and lining them were shelves, hundreds of them. On every shelf sat objects, personal things, teddy bears, shoes, crayons, locket necklaces, baby teeth, shreds of old drawings, notes scribbled in childish handwriting, and under each one, a small brass plaque. Names. Some were full, some were just first names, some were scratched out completely. I walked the rows slowly, read the names, saw pieces of people frozen in time. Every item a memory stored in a jar, labeled and cataloged like a museum for the forgotten. Then I found hers, Abby Matthews, her bear, the one I'd carried. But this one wasn't the same. It had blood along the seams, and its eyes were missing. The plaque beneath it read partial retrieval. Remainder with watchman. I stared at those words until my knees gave out. The house had her, but it hadn't taken all of her. I had part of her. And suddenly I understood what that meant. I wasn't just the one who remembered. I was the one who held the rest, her laugh, her voice, her stories, her breath. All the things too subtle to trap in jars, the living pieces. I was her tether, and if I forgot, if I slipped, if I let grief take over, she'd vanish completely. Not into death, but into the house, into its walls. Another memory filed away under flickering lights and sterile air. I stood, and I made a promise. Right there in the belly of the thing. I would not forget. I would not move on. I would carry her, even if it broke me. even if the house never let me go. And as I said it aloud, the lights flickered, the shelves shook, and somewhere deep in the walls, I heard her voice, singing, faint, broken, but still hers. I climbed the stairs, slower this time, each step echoing with her song, fragile as glass. The house let me leave the basement, not happily, not freely, but with permission, because it had what it wanted, a keeper, a witness, someone to tend the flame of memory so it didn't have to do the work itself. Back in my room, I found the final sign, my name carved into the desk, by someone else, not the house, not me. A single line under it, when your turn is over, close the door. I didn't know when that would be, but I knew this until that time came. I could not forget. There are days now when the house is quiet, when its breath slows to a crawl and the floorboards rest without groaning, when the mirrors stop shifting and the walls go still, and I almost start to believe it's over, that the memories have gone back to sleep, that the thing behind the door has turned its gaze elsewhere. But then a noise, always small, always misplaced, pulls me back. A chair that scrapes without reason. A faucet that runs for exactly 13 seconds. A door creaking open somewhere I know there isn't one. The house never really sleeps. It just plays dead. I've become something less than a person and more than a memory. My life now folds into the house like wallpaper peels into old glue. Layered, faded, stuck. I eat when I remember to. I sleep in bursts with one eye always half open. I can no longer tell what's real because the house doesn't make a show of its hauntings anymore. It's not trying to scare me. It's trying to merge with me, bit by bit, day by day. It becomes harder to tell which thoughts are mine and which ones are the house whispering from inside my skull. I hear things when I'm alone. Not voices, not like before. It's quieter now, subtler. A whisper behind the sound of the refrigerator hum, buried in the static of the radio, stitched into the flutter of pages when the wind rustles through my journals. It never says full sentences, just fragments, pieces of conversations that never happened, names I don't know, questions I never asked, things like how long has he been here, or he doesn't know what he forgot, or the one that always chills me the most, it isn't his memory anymore. The attic is sealed again. No door, no window, no trace. I went up there a few nights ago, climbed the stairs with a candle and a sharpened screwdriver, heart pounding like it used to when I was a child sneaking into forbidden rooms. I expected the mirror, the journal, the strange light, but there was only drywall now. Fresh, clean, seamless. I tapped it, knocked, even tried to break through, but the wall was solid, like it had never been cut or hollowed. But when I pressed my ear to it, I heard breathing. Not mine, not Abby's, something else, breathing slow and steady, listening, waiting. Downstairs, the house rearranges things in small ways. The salt ends up in the fridge. The coffee pot turns on at midnight. My toothbrush goes dry after just one use. Once I found the table set for 3 plates, silverware, water glasses. No food. I sat there for an hour before I realized I couldn't remember who the 3rd plate was for. When I finally cleared the table, I found something carved beneath one of the forks. Don't let her eat. I started hearing Abby in the walls again. At first, it was soft. Little giggles behind the plaster, footsteps in the vents, then whispers, then humming. One night, she said my name. Daniel. It stopped my heart. It was her voice. Not the warped imitation. Not the one sewn into the house. This was my Abby, but her voice sounded scared. I'm still here, she said. You're forgetting me. I shouted back, begged her to say something else. But the wall stayed quiet. That silence, hurt more than anything the house had ever done. It was an accusation. A truth. Because she was right. I was forgetting. I didn't mean to. But life, even inside this cursed husk of a home, pulls at you. I'd stopped writing her name every day. I'd stopped repeating her laugh before bed. Some nights I only thought about her once. Sometimes not at all. That's how the house works. Not with terror, with erosion. It doesn't scare you away, it wears you down, makes you tired, makes you lose track. And when you do, that's when it takes. That same night, I opened my old journal, desperate to write something, anything. But the pages had changed. No more Abby stories, no sketches, no notes on what the house had done. Instead, every single page had the same sentence, written in looping. Unfamiliar cursive, she doesn't belong to you anymore. The words pulsed on the page, as if alive, as if they meant to hurt me. And they did, because they were true. What part of Abby still remained was not mine to carry. It was never about memory alone. It was about responsibility. I'd held her spirit like a photograph, too tight, too long. And now, even she was pulling away, fading under the pressure of the house and my own weakness. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The house takes your tears too. Makes them dry before they leave your eyes. Turns grief into numbness. I sat there for hours, that journal in my lap, the candle beside me flickering, as if the flame itself didn't want to stay lit in this place. That was when I heard the scratching. Soft at first, from under the couch, then louder, from the crawl space behind the fireplace, then right beneath me. The floorboards bulged. I backed away. The boards split, and something pushed through. It wasn't a hand, not a claw, not anything I could name. Just fabric, faded, yellowed, dirty. A teddy bear. Not Abby's, not mine. One I didn't recognize. Wrapped around it was a ribbon soaked in something dark and sticky. Attached to it, a note, "You're not the only one who remembers." My hands trembled as I picked it up. The bear was wet. It reeked of mold and something older. Something that doesn't belong to the living world. I turned the note over. A name was written on the back. Not Abby, not Ethan, Miriam. I didn't know that name. Not yet, but the house did. And in the hours that followed, I heard her. A new voice, younger, softer, calling from the vents. From behind doors that didn't exist the day before. The house was growing again, feeding again. It was showing me its collection, not to threaten, to remind. This wasn't just my burden. This was a job, a legacy. Every person who ever forgot the house gave it power. Every name dropped, every memory repressed, every door left unopened. They were added to its hallways, stored in its impossible rooms. And now, one by one, the house was handing them back to me. Not to save, but to carry. Because once you see the house, once you understand it, it marks you. And once it marks you, it doesn't need to chase you anymore. It just waits for you to forget, and then it whispers welcome back. I didn't sleep after Miriam's name appeared. How could I? The house had revealed a new voice, a new life lost beneath its seams, and I hadn't even begun to process what that meant before the next shift began. The walls hadn't moved yet, but something beneath them had, a low groan threaded through the foundation, like something old and vast had stirred beneath the floorboards, rolling in its shallow grave, brushing the underside of my reality with splintered fingers. I kept the teddy bear close, even though it disgusted me. The smell was unbearable at first. Mold, rot, something coppery and sour clung to the fabric, like it had soaked in loss for decades. But the more time I spent with it in my hands, the more I realized it warmed. It wasn't inanimate. Not exactly. There was a presence in it. Not a soul, maybe, but something echoing. Sometimes, when I held it long enough, I swore I could feel a heartbeat pulsing through the cotton stuffing. That night, the hallway changed again. It didn't shift in front of me. It was more insidious than that. A door appeared where there had never been one. Low to the floor, no knob. Just a flat wooden panel framed into the baseboards like it had always been part of the house. I almost didn't see it. Only when I dropped the bear and bent to pick it up did I notice the outline, a faint groove in the floor molding. A crawl space. I knew better. I knew what waited behind things that were newly remembered, but I also knew what would happen if I ignored it. I opened the panel. The air that spilled out was cold and dry, sharp with the scent of paper and old rope. I held the flashlight in front of me and crawled inside. The space was narrow, the ceiling barely high enough for me to move without scraping my back. The deeper I went, the more the walls constricted. Spiderwebs clung to my mouth, dust filled my lungs, but I kept going. After 5 yards, I came to a room under the floor. It shouldn't have been possible. There was no dip in the foundation, no space for this to exist. But here it was. The ceiling just high enough for me to kneel. The walls were stone, and the floor was dirt, and in the center was a trapdoor, rusted and chained, with dozens of names carved into the wood around its edges. Ethan, Abby, Miriam, Cole, Junie, Amir, Lena, Elias, Marie, names etched by different hands. Some neat, others frenzied. Some scratched over with lines. Some circled. Some smeared with blackened fingerprints. Each one was a life the house had taken. Each one a memory it refused to forget. My name wasn't there. Not yet. I didn't open the trapdoor. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't move. Some instinct buried deep in my gut screamed that to lift that door would mean seeing everything at once. All of them. Not as they were, but as the house had kept them. Twisted, stored, preserved like specimens pinned in a display case made of grief and silence. But something began to move beneath it. The chains rattled once, then again. And then a knock. Soft, deliberate, from the other side. 3 taps. Then silence. I backed away, breath held tight in my throat. The crawl space felt colder now, narrower. Like the house had noticed my intrusion and was adjusting its ribs around me. I scrambled backward, clawing at the dirt, dragging myself out until I burst back into the hallway, gasping like I'd surfaced from drowning. The door sealed behind me, not with a latch, not with hinges. It simply vanished, gone like it had never been there. But the dirt stayed under my fingernails, and the names remained in my mind. Later that night, I tried to sleep. I left the teddy bear on the nightstand, afraid to let it rest too close. It stared at me with those eyeless sockets, its face turned slightly toward the corner of the room. I couldn't bring myself to turn it away. I was too afraid that if I did, it would turn back on its own. At 2:13 a.m., the same time always, I woke to whispers, different voices now, not one, many, all saying the same word, under, over and over, louder with each repetition, like a chorus buried beneath the floor, rising toward the surface, demanding to be heard. I rolled out of bed, grabbed the flashlight again, and stood still. The whispering stopped instantly, but I could hear them breathing, from under the house, from inside the walls. It wasn't just memories the house kept, it was pieces. Fragments of lives too incomplete to leave behind, names with nowhere else to go. The house had become a refuge for the lost, except it wasn't saving them. It was digesting them. Slowly, carefully. Like a spider nursing its web, sipping on its prey without ever fully consuming it. I wrote down every name I could remember, filled an entire notebook with them. Even the ones I wasn't sure about. Even the ones that felt like they'd been made up. Because I had learned something terrifying that night in the crawl space. If I remembered them, they weren't dead. Not fully. They were waiting. For someone to say their names out loud again. For someone to pull them out. But I also knew the truth: the house would not give them back freely. For every name I reclaimed, it would demand a memory in return. A trade. A price. And if I wasn't careful, I'd give up all that I was just to remember someone who might already be gone. Still, I began to whisper them. Each night, alone in the dark, I knelt at the foot of my bed and whispered their names like prayers. Sometimes I'd hear faint noises in response. Scratches, breaths, taps, and once, just once, I heard laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, relieved. Like someone somewhere had just been remembered again for the first time in years. And I wept, because for a moment I didn't feel alone. Not in the house, not in my mind, not in the memory of all those the world had let slip through the cracks. The house wasn't a prison anymore. It was a ledger, and I had become its bookkeeper. Each night, I turned a page. Each night, I whispered another name. Each night, I promised, I won't forget you. Not tonight. And for now, the house listens and waits. I don't remember the sound of my own laugh anymore. It hit me 2 mornings ago. When I was washing the cup I always use for coffee, the one with the chipped rim and the faded cartoon owl on the side. I dropped it, not from clumsiness, not from fright. Just an odd, stiff pause in my fingers, like I'd forgotten how to hold. It shattered, and I watched the pieces scatter across the tile like teeth. And then I remembered something. Or more specifically, I realized I didn't. I couldn't recall the last time I'd laughed. Not a chuckle. Not even a smile that reached my eyes. The house had taken it, and I hadn't even noticed when it happened. That's how it works now. Not with horror or blood or shadows crawling across ceilings. It takes quietly. It takes things that don't scream when they're gone. Your habits, your rituals, your tone of voice, your ability to cry during sad movies, the way you remember a smell before it fades. And once it takes one, it opens its hand and offers something in return. Not as a gift, as a trade. The first time I truly understood that was when I heard the voice. Not one of the old ones. Not Abby, not Ethan, not the others whose names I keep pressed into the pages of my journal like brittle leaves. This one was new, older, heavier. It came through the radio. A dead station, static hissing like wind on ice, and then, just a whisper, curled beneath the crackle like a root beneath a frozen pond. You forgot your birthday, it said. I froze. I had. It had been days ago. I couldn't remember how old I was turning. Couldn't recall if I'd told anyone, or if there was anyone left to tell. You can trade for it, the voice said. It's still here. I listened. Didn't speak. It continued, softer this time, almost coaxing, give me your dog's name. That nearly dropped me to my knees, because I didn't have a dog, not now, but I had, when I was 6, a shaggy brown mutt named Clover who used to sleep under my bed and bark at shadows I couldn't see. He died when I was 8, buried in the backyard. I hadn't thought of him in years. I didn't even know that memory was still inside me. And yet, the house did. It wanted to take it. That memory. That love. That ache. In exchange for one forgotten birthday. That was the first trade. I didn't take it. But that night, Clover's bark echoed through the vents. I hadn't heard it in over a decade, but I knew it like my own blood. Deep. Protective. Wild. I ran to the basement door, where the sound had come from, and when I opened it, the air rushed past me like breath from a deep cavern. There was no dog, just the faint imprint of paw prints in the dust. And a ribbon. One of the ones he used to wear when my mom insisted on tying bows on his collar during holidays. I picked it up and wept like a child, because the house had offered me something it never should have known. And now that it had shown me what it could do, I understood what it had been building toward. Not just collecting names, not just hoarding memories. It was creating a currency. The journal filled with new phrases now. Not in my handwriting, not even in English sometimes. Words I didn't know, but somehow understood. Instructions, warnings, bargains. One page simply read for a laugh, offer a silence. Another for a moment of light, give up a moment of touch. And the one that kept me awake for 2 nights straight for Abby. Give us her name. That was when I realized just how deeply the house wanted her gone. Not dead, erased. It couldn't take her from me while I still whispered her name every night. While I still clung to her laugh, her scream. The way she curled her fingers when she lied. But it could offer me peace. It could offer me sleep. Sanity, a way out. All I had to do was say yes. Say her name once, and then never say it again. Trade her identity for freedom. That was the deal. The house spoke to me more after that. Sometimes in the hum of the fridge. Sometimes through the whine of the floorboards. Once, even through the rain tapping the windows. Morse, code soft. But deliberate. It didn't beg. It didn't plead. It simply waited, like a storekeeper tapping a ledger, waiting for the customer to decide what their soul was worth. One night, I wrote a letter. To myself. To remember. I taped it to the ceiling above my bed, knowing I would wake and stare at it first. It read, "Do not make the trade." The next morning, it was gone. Not just fallen. Gone. Tape still on the ceiling. Paper missing. And in its place, written in charcoal black letters, a new line, "Then give us something else." I felt it then. A tug. Not on my body. On my mind. A thread being pulled loose. And in the hours that followed, I forgot my grandmother's voice. Just like that. I knew her name. Her face, but her voice. Gone. Utterly. No laughter. No lullabies. No scolding tone. Nothing. It had taken something anyway. That's when I realized the truth. Refusing a trade doesn't stop the taking. It only lets the house choose what it wants instead. And it always takes something important. Now, every day is a negotiation. I wake. I take inventory of what I still remember. My own name. My face in the mirror. The color of Abby's eyes. My first kiss. The last time I felt joy. I write them all down. Every single one. Because I know that if I forget them, if I trust my mind to hold them unaided, they'll be bartered away in the night. The house whispers in kind. Trade for peace. Trade for silence. Trade for warmth. And sometimes I want to say yes. Sometimes I think about how easy it would be to rest, to stop holding so tight to the memories that weigh like anchors inside me. But then I remember her, standing in that attic room, eyes wide, mouth stitched, tearing at her own reflection to come home. And I know she's still watching me, waiting to see if I'll hold the line, or trade her name for sleep. The house is patient, but I am stubborn. And tonight, as the whispers coil beneath the floorboards again, I say her name out loud, clear, proud, and the house goes still. For now, there's a smell that comes before the house changes, before the walls shift, before the air thickens with that too silent hum. It's not sulfur. It's not rot. It's something more intimate. The scent of burnt paper, of photographs charred at the edges. It hits you in the lungs not like smoke, but like grief, as if the air itself mourns what it's about to lose. That's how I knew the house was about to take something again. I woke with my mouth dry, heart already racing, the room hotter than it should have been. The ceiling fan spun uselessly, slicing air that wasn't moving. The smell was everywhere, in my hair, on my pillow, beneath my fingernails. I stumbled out of bed, dizzy, eyes already watering, and that's when I saw it. The journal was on fire. Not with flames, but with light. Each page glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The ink shimmered and slid as if refusing to stay in place. The words I'd written the night before, Abby's name twice, underlined, began to blur, not fade, distort. They twisted on the page until the letters looked unfamiliar, like a language I once knew in a dream, but forgot the moment I opened my eyes. I reached for it. The instant my fingers touched the cover, it burned, not hot, not painful, but sharp, like static cutting through skin. I yanked my hand back, heart pounding. The journal pulsed again, and then the light blinked out. Silence. Darkness. When I dared open it again, the pages were blank. Every single one. All the names. Gone. I screamed. Not out of fear, but fury. Weeks. Months. Hours of remembering, preserving, holding those people inside me like relics. And now the house had taken them in one silent flash. But it wasn't over. The closet door creaked open behind me. Slowly, I turned, blood still rushing in my ears, and stepped toward it. Inside, hanging from a coat hanger, was something I hadn't seen in years. A sweatshirt. Bright red. Too small for me now. The one Abby used to wear when we went to the lake. When she insisted she didn't need a jacket, but always stole mine anyway. It still had the faded Dino Explorer patch on the sleeve. I hadn't seen it since before she vanished, since before the house swallowed her whole. I pulled it off the hanger. It was heavy. Weighted. Something was tucked in the pocket. I reached in and pulled out a scrap of paper, folded 3 times, edges torn, the ink barely visible. But the moment I unfolded it, I knew the handwriting. Mine. A child's version of it, crooked and uneven. It said, "Don't forget me this time." I couldn't breathe. Not just because it hurt, but because something inside me had shifted. I didn't remember writing that. Not ever. But I believed I had, because the house was playing deeper now. It wasn't just trading memories or taking them by force. It was rearranging them, sowing lies that felt like truth, burying truths in fiction until I couldn't tell if what I remembered was real or just rehearsed. I left the room, sweatshirt in hand, and went to the fireplace. It was cold, unused, but above it now hung a mirror I had never seen before. Oval, dustless. The frame was carved with symbols, loops and lines, and something that almost resembled names, but none I could read. I stepped closer. The reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't mine. It was me, but younger, 8 or 9. Tears dried on my cheeks. Dirt smudged across my forehead, and I was holding something, a match. Behind me in the reflection, the house burned. Not metaphorically, it was on fire. Walls collapsing, windows cracked. Black smoke curling up into the sky like morning veils. I stood there, younger me, match still in hand, watching the house crumble behind me, and I was smiling. The mirror shimmered, cracked down the center, and then went black. I stumbled back. What was that? What did it mean? Had I tried to burn the house before? Had it already happened? I ran to the basement, where all the names had been stored, where the shelves had once pulsed with memory like veins beneath skin. But the basement was different now. Smaller, empty. The shelves were gone, the walls plain. Only one thing remained in the center of the floor, a box, old, wooden, the lid carved with a familiar shape, Abby's teddy bear, but twisted, the eyes replaced by holes, the smile now a jagged gash. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Inside were ashes, black, thick, warm, and tucked inside them, curled like it had been hiding for years, was a matchbox. One match remained. I held it in my palm for a long time, unsure what it meant. A threat, a memory, a warning, or an invitation. That night, I sat in the living room with the sweatshirt across my lap, the match resting on the table, the smell of burnt paper still lingering. I stared at the flames of a candle, waiting, knowing the house would speak. And when it did, it wasn't a whisper. It was Abby, from the vent behind me. "I saw you do it," she said. Her voice was small, hurt. "I watched you burn it." "I didn't," I whispered back. "I never. You wanted to forget me." Tears ran down my face before I felt them. I didn't remember that. I didn't. But what if it was true? What if, somewhere deep down, I had wanted to erase it all? The guilt, the loss, the pain. What if I had struck that match once before? "I'm sorry," I said. She didn't answer. Only silence followed. And when I looked again, the match was gone, vanished from the table. Only a faint scorch mark remained in its place. And now, sometimes at night, the smell returns. Stronger, closer. The house is reminding me what I tried to do once, I may have to do again. Not out of escape, but mercy. Because not everything deserves to be remembered forever. Not every name can be saved. And one day, one final day, this house will demand to burn. And I'll have to decide whether to let it take me with it. I carry them with me now. Not just Abby, not just the names in the journal, but all of them. The ones I've never met. The ones I didn't even know existed until the house whispered their names into my ear like a confession no one wanted to say aloud. Each one a weight, a presence, an invisible tether wrapped tight around my ribs. Some days I feel like I can barely breathe under the pressure of all that memory. But I hold it. I have to. Because the house remembers too. But it doesn't remember like we do. It remembers to possess. The line between myself and the house is thinner now. I feel it when I speak, when I blink, when I look too long into mirrors and see something watching from just behind my reflection. Not copying me, studying, waiting, learning how to be me better than I ever could. I used to wonder if the house wanted to kill me. That would have been easier to fight. But I know better now. It doesn't want to destroy me. It wants to wear me. It wants to become me. To carry these memories the way I do. But it doesn't understand them. Not really. It thinks remembering is the same as owning. That to speak a name, to echo a laugh, to mimic a voice is the same as honoring the life it came from. But memory without love is just mimicry. And mimicry is the house's native tongue. It spoke again last night, through the pipes this time. A rhythmic knock, 6 short taps, 1 long pause. Then again, it wasn't random. I don't know how I knew, but I did. I wrote it down, mapped the taps like Morse code, and after 2 hours, I decoded the message. 3 words. Trade your name. It's been circling this for weeks now, like a predator testing the edge of its prey's territory. At first it wanted pieces, memories, then moments, then voices, then Abby. But this was different. It was asking for me, not my life, not my body, my identity, the core of who I am. Because if I gave that up, if I let go of that last thread, I'd no longer be the keeper of the names. The house would inherit everything, my guilt, my grief, my knowledge, my purpose. And then it could keep the door open forever. Because without me, there'd be no one left to close it. I didn't answer. But it didn't stop. That same night, I found a note folded neatly beneath my pillow. Paper yellowed and soft with age. Writing inked in a shade I'd never seen. Black, but with a shimmer beneath it like beetle wings or oil slicks. It said, "We can remember for you." And at the bottom, in block letters, underlined once "Neno more our punlen, no more filalwer, JST rast." I held the paper in my hand and stared at it for what felt like hours. The words didn't change. They didn't blink or vanish like they sometimes do. They just sat there, truthful, patient. Because it wasn't lying. That's the worst part. The house can remember. It will, but not like I do. Not with sorrow. Not with meaning. It will remember like a machine. Cold. Detached. Eternal. I tucked the note into the fireplace. Set it on fire. And as the flame curled it into ash, I heard a scream from inside the walls. High and shrill and furious. Because I had refused it. Again. But that refusal came with a cost. In the morning, I woke up and couldn't remember the sound of my mother's voice. I still saw her face, still knew her eyes. But the voice, the way she said my name, the way her laugh caught on the edges like wind chimes, the hum she used to sing while cleaning, gone. I tried forcing it, played old videos, called old voicemails. Nothing worked. Her voice didn't match anymore. It sounded too thin, too unfamiliar. Like hearing someone else read her lines. The house had taken her voice from my memory, punishment, or a warning. And then, that evening, I found a new journal. Not mine. Bound in leather, old, cracked, pages yellowed with time. Inside were notes like mine, drawings of rooms, hallways that shifted, symbols scratched on mirrors, lists of names. A different handwriting, messier, but the pattern was familiar. One page had only a single sentence. I thought I was the first. I flipped through more. At the end, a date, from 30 years ago, and beneath it, in slanted, trembling ink, I made the trade. I let it take me. It still wasn't enough. The journal ended there. No signature, no name, only a smear of something red on the back cover. The house had tried with others before me. It had them. Still, somewhere in its walls. But none had finished the task. None had held the names long enough to matter. It always finds a way to take. I'm beginning to understand there is no victory here. Only resistance. Each day I remember is a day the house doesn't win. Each name I write down is another anchor in the soil of what once was. But it's hard. God, it's hard. I'm forgetting things I never thought I could. The texture of my old bedsheets. The way rain sounded on the tin roof of our first home. The smell of Abby's hair when she played in the leaves too long. Every day I fight to keep those memories alive. And every day the house takes something smaller in exchange. I don't know how long I can keep doing this. But I also know what happens if I stop. The door stays open, the names fade, the house grows, and the next person. They might not fight at all, so I write. Every night, I light a candle and speak the names aloud. Even if they're fractured, even if I barely remember the faces, even if it's just syllables in the dark. Because as long as someone remembers, the house can't have them completely. And as long as it's me, I will not trade, not even for peace, not even for sleep, not even for my own name. It began again in my sleep. Not the dreams themselves. I hadn't truly dreamed in months, but something worse. Something that hovered just beyond sleep. A space between waking and oblivion where the house had learned to creep in. It didn't need nightmares. It didn't need twisted faces or chases through endless halls. It only needed quiet, and in that quiet, it started to build me a door. At first, it was a shape in the dark, a rectangle behind my eyelids. No color, no detail, just a silhouette, like something waiting to be remembered. Every night, it sharpened. The edges thickened. The texture of wood began to form. Rusted hinges grew in like bones. By the fourth night, I could see the doorknob old brass, worn by hands that no longer existed. But what terrified me most wasn't the way the door looked. It was what was behind it. Because I already knew. Before I'd even touched it, before I'd even dreamed of reaching out, I knew that door was me. Not a memory, not a metaphor. The house had begun building a version of me inside itself. Piece by piece. It had my voice already. It had my guilt. It had my silence, my laughter, my favorite song. And now it was building the room around it. One where I lived. Or would live. Or had lived once before. Time no longer made sense here. It wanted to finish me. And once it did, I would be the house. Not just lost inside it. Absorbed. The next day, I tore through every corner of the house searching for new cracks. Signs of progress. Because the house never changed all at once. It creeped. Subtle adjustments. One corner at a time. A shifted photo. A creak from a floorboard that used to be silent. Paint that peeled in the shape of names. I found the first change under my bed. A thin wooden plank had come loose. Underneath it, nestled in the dust, was a key. It was small, old-fashioned, the kind that belonged to a chest or a journal, not a door, except, carved into the shaft in tiny, precise etching, was a word, Daniel, my name. The name the house had tried to take. I held it in my palm and felt a warmth, unnatural and pulsing. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't even an object. It was a piece, a shard of myself returned. But why? That's what scared me most. Because the house never gave anything back without reason. I kept the key on a string around my neck, though it grew heavier with each passing hour. That night, I heard the door again in the space between sleep. Closer now, the knob twitched in the dark, and I felt something behind it, me. The version the house was finishing. It knocked. Once. Twice. Then whispered, "I remember better than you do." The voice chilled me, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was perfect. The right tone. The right rhythm. The exact cadence I used when reading aloud. It didn't sound like it was trying to impersonate me anymore. It believed it was me. I didn't sleep after that. Instead, I wrote. Page after page in a new journal, one I made by hand. I didn't trust anything store-bought anymore. I stitched the pages with thread I boiled myself. Ink made from charcoal and rainwater. Every name I could recall. Every memory, no matter how small. I refused to lose more. But the house was no longer trying to erase. It was copying. Stealing, not to destroy, but to replace. To replicate me until I wasn't needed anymore. That night, I heard a voice outside my window. Not behind it. Outside. From the yard. I peeked through the blinds and saw someone standing there. Just beyond the reach of the porch light. Still. Silent. Staring up at my window. I couldn't see the face, but I recognized the posture. It was me. I froze. Not because it was impossible, nothing was any more, but because of what it held in its hand. Abby's bare, clean, new, eyes intact, and then it waved. Slow, deliberate, like I'd finally caught up. The thing that had been growing in the house had stepped outside. It no longer needed the walls. I ran to the front door, locked it, bolted the windows. But part of me knew none of that mattered. The house wasn't a place anymore. It was an echo. And the echo had grown loud enough to walk. When I checked the yard again, the figure was gone. But the bear was on the porch. Left sitting upright, legs crossed, head tilted. I didn't bring it inside. I couldn't. I left it there, watching the front steps until dawn, knowing it would vanish before morning. And it did. Only a scorched ring remained where it had sat. The next evening, I found something worse. A new mirror in the hallway. One I hadn't placed. It was long, narrow, with a warped glass surface that shimmered like water. I avoided it at first. Refused to look. I'd learned my lesson with mirrors. They remember things we try to forget. But the third night, and I passed it without thinking, and I saw a face staring back that wasn't mine. It wore my face. But it was older. Paler. The skin stretched thinner. And the eyes were dark, hollow pits, the way the house likes them. Wide enough to swallow names whole. It reached out, palm against the glass, mimicking me, mocking me. I stepped away. But it smiled. A smile that grew wider with every step I took, until the mouth tore into the jawline and stretched far past what any human skull could hold. Then it whispered, "You're almost ready." The hallway light flickered, and in the blink of a moment the mirror was gone, just wall, smooth, white, untouched. But when I checked the journal I'd locked in my drawer, it was gone too. Only one page remained. A torn scrap left in the center of the desk. 3 words, "Your door's open." I ran to my room. Nothing seemed out of place, until I saw the key, gone from my neck, the string snap, and the closet, cracked open. Just enough to show a sliver of darkness inside that breathed. That night, I didn't write. I didn't speak. I lay awake, waiting for the knock behind my eyes. And when it came, it was from both sides of the door. There's a silence that comes before something answers you. Not the natural kind. Not the pause in a conversation or the stillness of the wind. This silence feels prepared. Like the air itself is holding its breath, bracing for what it already knows is coming. That's the kind of silence that hung over me the morning after the door opened inside my dreams. It wasn't fear I felt when I woke up. It was confirmation. I didn't imagine it. The door I'd seen in sleep had crossed into the waking world. Something from the house had passed through, and now it wanted to talk. The key was still gone. The closet door remained slightly ajar, unmoved from where I'd found it the night before. But I knew, if I touched it, it would swing open on its own, too easily, too eagerly. Like it was waiting for me to finish something I hadn't realized I'd begun. Instead, I tried to forget. I tried to exist. I boiled water, made toast. Took the burnt piece anyway, anything to feel normal. But the house knows when you're pretending, and it hates it. The television switched on by itself. A static burst, followed by an image frozen mid-frame. A home video. I didn't recognize it at first. The timestamp was decades old. A birthday party. Balloons half deflated. A little girl in a paper crown blowing out candles. No sound. Just that awful flicker of taped degradation. But as I watched, something made my stomach drop. The camera panned to the left, to the group of adults nearby. One of them was looking directly into the lens, right into me. And it was me. Same eyes, same scar on the chin, same expression I wear when I'm trying to stay calm. I don't remember this party. I don't remember being there. But the footage said otherwise. I ran to the VCR and hit stop, but the tape didn't eject. It whirred louder, deeper, like the machine was struggling against something buried in its gears. Then the screen went black, and a new message appeared in white type. Woe the bon har before. I backed away. Because maybe that was the real horror all along. Not that the house was changing me, or even replacing me, but that it had always been me. That every time I thought I'd made a choice, Every time I whispered a name or wrote a memory, I was repeating something already written. A loop, a role, a play I hadn't realized I'd auditioned for. The phone rang. Not my cell. The rotary phone in the kitchen I never use. It rang only once. I picked it up anyway. No voice, just breath, slow, rhythmic, not mechanical, human. And then, after several seconds, "Can I come in?" The voice was soft, mine, but wrong, like someone remembering my voice from a dream. I didn't answer, but something in the walls did. A knock, from the inside, followed by another voice, whispering through the vent beneath the sink. "You already let him." I dropped the phone and stepped back. Because the truth is, I had. The night I dreamed of the door, when I didn't fight it. The night the bear appeared on the porch, and I didn't burn it. The moment I held that key too long in my palm and felt warmth instead of fear. Little choices. That's how it gets in. That's how it answers. Not by asking, but by waiting until your fear becomes agreement. I raced to the journal, flipped through the last remaining pages. Anything to find names, anchors, something to hold me. But most were gone, words bled into blank paper like they drowned. All but one, Abby, still there. Still underlined, still mine, and for a moment, I thought I could fight again. That as long as I had her name, I could resist whatever version of me the house was sculpting behind that dream door. But then came the worst part. A new name written underneath hers. In someone else's handwriting. My name. Underlined. Then a single word beneath it. Pressed so deep into the page it tore the paper. Rapula CD. I dropped the journal. Felt something behind me. Turned. The hallway had lengthened again. A corridor where the wall should have been. And at the end of it, barely visible in the flicker of light, was a door. That door. The one from my dream. It stood open now. And in the shadows beyond it, something moved. A silhouette stepped into the frame. It was me. Not just in shape, exact, same clothes, same breathing, same tiny scratch on the wrist from where I'd cut myself shaving 3 days ago. It smiled. A slow, patient stretch of lips that didn't reach the eyes. And then it spoke, "You don't have to remember anymore." I took a step back, heart pounding. The copy stepped forward. With every movement it made, I felt something drain from me. Not blood. Not breath. Memory. Snippets of childhood vanished. My favorite teacher's name. The smell of pine from a cabin trip. Gone. I staggered. The house was taking through it now. This wasn't just mimicry. This was the final act. Replacement. The only thing I could do was scream. Not for help. But a name. "Any name! Abby!" I shouted over and over. My throat tore with it. Abby, Abby, Abby. The hallway cracked. The walls peeled like paper burned from within. The copy flinched, only slightly. But it felt it. I pressed forward, shoving the name into the air with every last bit of will I had. It wasn't magic. It wasn't ritual. It was resistance. One word the house couldn't erase. I saw the copy shake, its lips twitch, and then, without warning, it turned and ran. Back through the door. Back into the dream, slamming it shut behind it with a sound like thunder in reverse. The hallway crumbled, vanished. I collapsed, sobbing, alone. The house went silent, no whispers, no knocks. Only my breath, and the taste of her name on my tongue. Still mine, still remembered, but I knew the truth. It wasn't over. That version of me, the one the house had been building, was still inside, still waiting. And next time, it wouldn't ask to come in. It would just open the door. The next morning, I found myself staring at my own hands, turning them over, as if trying to confirm they were still mine. The skin looked right. Familiar scars, the freckle on my left index finger, the faint burn mark from the time I grabbed a hot pan too quickly. But something was off. I didn't feel them the way I used to. Like sensation was one layer too deep. Like I was wearing myself instead of being myself. The thought crept in before I could fight it. What if the version that ran through the door wasn't the copy? What if I was? That's how it starts. Doubt. It grows like mold in the corners of your mind, feeding off the silence. The house knows this. It doesn't have to whisper if it can get you to whisper to yourself. I went back to the mirror. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I had to look and see what looked back. My reflection was waiting. It didn't move, didn't twitch, didn't try to mock or mimic. It just watched. Eyes a little too still, posture too perfect. Like it had finally realized all it needed to do to break me was nothing. The absence of horror is its own kind of horror, I've learned. Because when nothing happens, you start to fill in the spaces with all the worst things your mind can imagine. But I had to keep going. So I did the only thing I could do. I wrote. Page after page. Not names this time, questions. Who built the house? Why me? How many others had it eaten before I arrived? What was on the other side of the dream door when the copy ran? What would happen if I followed it? The questions helped. Not because they had answers, but because they meant I was still asking, still thinking, still me. But the house hates questions. Later that day, I found the bathroom mirror fogged up. I hadn't taken a shower. The water hadn't run. And on the glass, written in long, wet streaks, no, on smear ars. O n el immense. I wiped it away with my sleeve, but the words stayed, etched behind the steam as if the glass had memorized them. I smashed the mirror. Glass rained onto the tile like glitter from a broken sky. Blood ran from my hand where a shard caught the skin, but even then, I felt detached, like pain was happening to someone next to me. I cleaned the wound, wrapped it, then watched, hours later, as the same cut appeared on my reflection's hand in a new mirror. Only slower, delayed, as if my reflection was no longer mirroring me in real time, but studying me, catching up. That night, the hallway returned. Different this time. Longer, no door at the end, just shapes. Dozens of them, all silhouettes. Human, unmoving. Each one turned away from me, staring at nothing. Lined up in perfect rows like figures in a museum exhibit. Each wearing a face, not literal masks, faces. Faces I recognized, one by one. My third-grade teacher. A neighbor from childhood. A girl I once kissed under fireworks and never saw again. My father. Even Abby. But not Abby now. Abby older. Older than I'd ever known her. Like the house had imagined what she might have become, just to torment me. And then I saw one more. At the far end, the back of a head I knew better than anyone. Mine. It turned, and the face smiled, not maliciously, sadly. Almost like it pitied me. Almost like it wanted to say, "You still don't get it, do you?" And then it whispered. I couldn't hear it at first, so I stepped closer, and the closer I got, the more the others began to whisper too. A cacophony of voices, different tones, different memories. But all mine, all versions the house had harvested, copied, perfected. I fell to my knees, because I understood then. This wasn't a battle I was meant to win. It was a harvest I was meant to join. Every memory I preserved, every piece I protected. It wasn't resisting the house. It was feeding it, making it sharper, smarter, closer. Because now the house didn't need to take from the unwilling. It could create someone who would give freely. Me? All it needed was time. I stumbled out of the hallway, heart pounding, mind unraveling. The lights flickered behind me, and when I looked back, the hallway was gone again. But I could still feel them. All those versions of me, all those faces, all those lives. Waiting, remembering. The weight of it was unbearable, but I wrote anyway, because it's all I have. A tether to this version of myself, however fragile. And I've started a new list, not of names, not of questions, but of rules. Ones I whisper to myself every morning before I dare speak to the house. 1, if you see your face outside, don't follow. 2, if the door appears again, do not open it, even in dreams. 3, if you forget your name, do not ask the mirror. 4, if the house offers something familiar, walk away. 5, if it ever speaks in your own voice, run. Because I think the house is closed now. So close it doesn't need tricks anymore. It can wait. Because sooner or later, I'll get tired. And when I do, the shape that remains will no longer be me. The house has many rooms. Most of them I've seen. Some I pretend not to see. But there's one that doesn't show itself until you stop searching. Until you've given up on understanding anything, and the only thing left is to wander. That's when it appears, almost as a joke, as if to say, finally. Now we can begin. It showed itself after 3 days without sleep. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, head pressed against the wall outside the kitchen, trying to remember what coffee used to taste like. The clock above the fridge had stopped again. 3:14, the same time it always stops now. The pipes had gone quiet, which somehow made the silence worse. And then, in the corner of my eye, past the pantry door and behind a set of coats that hadn't been there yesterday, I saw the outline of something new. A crack in the wood paneling. Not a doorway, not at first. Just a thin vertical seam, like a scar the house tried to hide but failed. I stood, approached it slowly, and pressed my fingers to the gap. It was warm, beating almost. I pulled back, then pushed. The wall opened inward without resistance, and there it was. A room I'd never seen. A room that felt like it had been waiting for me all along. The air inside was dry, thick. Dust coated everything like frost. The only light came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, swinging slowly though there was no breeze. It didn't buzz. It hummed. A deep, almost human tone, like a lullaby stretched too far. There was no furniture, no windows, only walls, and each wall was covered in writing, not painted, not written in pen or ink, carved, deep, harsh gouges, each word etched into the wood as if by fingernail or bone or something worse. Some words repeated, some were names, some weren't in any language I knew, but they pulsed ever so slightly, as if the wood was still bleeding from the cuts. I stepped inside, slowly, careful not to breathe too deeply. The door behind me didn't close, it sealed, silently, gone. I was trapped. But the strangest part, the part that didn't hit me until I was standing dead center of that awful room, was that I didn't panic. I couldn't. Something about the air in there dulled fear, not comfort, just emptiness. Like the room held the absence of all things, no emotion, no identity, just pure, clean vacancy. That's when I realized the truth. This room had no name, because it was meant to have none. It was a template, a place the house built when it was almost finished with you. Not to contain you, to erase you. One wall near the far corner was different, less carved, smoother, and in the center of that space, etched more carefully than the rest, were 5 names. I didn't recognize any of them, but beneath the list, a final word had been added, lower than the rest, like a signature, yours. I stared at that word for what felt like hours, until I noticed the carvings changing, very slowly, but definitely changing. The edges softened, letters straight, and then I saw it. One of the names shifted, became a new one, Abby. Then another changed. My father. One by one, the names I'd written, the memories I'd tried so desperately to hold, reshaped into these old, foreign labels. The house wasn't stealing the names anymore. It was rewriting them, making them its own. If memory gives something meaning, then renaming it lets you own it. And the house had become very good at ownership. The longer I stood there, the heavier my thoughts felt. Like something was tugging them from me. Word by word, I tried to whisper Abby's name to anchor myself again. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. I wasn't just forgetting. I was being forgotten. The room was working on me. Unmaking, I backed toward where the door had been. Slammed my hands against the wall, searching for a seam, a crack, anything. But it was just smooth wood now. Unbroken, as if the opening had never existed. And then I heard it, not from behind me, not from the walls, from inside my head, a voice identical to mine, calm, patient, absolute. You don't need a name. I collapsed to the floor, dizzy, trembling, heart punching at my ribs. The carvings all around me began to flicker. Not literally, but in my mind, like 1,000 memories flashing at once. Some mine, some not. Some never existed at all. A playground that didn't look familiar but felt like home. A woman's face I loved but didn't recognize. A dog I cried for even though I'd never owned one. The house was feeding me memories now, filling in the empty spaces it had carved out, replacing the ones I'd clung to with replicas I couldn't argue with, because they felt just as real. And that's the trick, isn't it? If you feel it deeply enough, if it brings you to tears or makes your heart swell, does it matter if it's real? It does. Because once that line's blurred, once you let the fake live beside the truth, the house wins. It becomes your only truth. I screamed, louder than I thought possible. A scream of refusal, of rage. And something cracked, not in the walls, in me. A pressure released, a memory returned. Abby, in her red hoodie, sitting by the lake, holding a flat rock in one hand and saying, "The trick isn't to throw it hard, it's to let go at the right time." Her voice, her face, real, mine. I held on to that image like a rope out of hell and slammed my palm against the smooth wall once more, and it opened. Cracked along the seam like breaking ice. I fell through the door and landed hard on the floor of the pantry, gasping like I'd been underwater. The coats were gone. The crack in the wall sealed itself seconds later, as if it had never been there. But I knew I had seen the future of forgetting. The final destination for every version of me the house failed to fully devour. And now I was back, half erased, but still named, still me. I crawled to my journal, hand shaking, and with the last good ink I had left, I scrawled 3 words in all caps across the next blank page, Dio now tantar. Because if the house offers you a door without a name, it's not offering a choice. It's offering an end. There's a sound that never stops now. Not even in silence. It's not loud. You wouldn't even notice it at first. Just a low, consistent hum, like the inside of a refrigerator or a distant generator. But once you hear it, truly notice it, you can't unhear it. It follows you, lingers in the corners of each room, just outside your hearing range, until you're no longer sure if it's sound or thought, real or imagined. That hum is the house's breath. After the nameless room, the hum got worse. It moved with me. I'd leave one part of the house, hear it fade, but as soon as I stopped moving, there it was again. Coiling up from under the floor, humming through the walls, pressing against the backs of my teeth. I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear this time, but because the sound wouldn't let me. Sleep requires surrender, and the house had made surrender dangerous. It's been days now. I measure them in candle stubs and the cold meals I force myself to eat. Every night, I check the journal, but it remains blank beyond the pages I've already written. That's never happened before. Usually, the journal responds in some way, flipping its own pages, bleeding ink, offering symbols I don't understand. But now, it's silent. Too silent. As if it's waiting for me to forget enough before it speaks again. I wonder sometimes if the house is testing me, watching to see how long I can last. Or maybe this isn't a test. Maybe this is the result. Maybe I already failed, and this is what comes next. A slow unraveling of everything I thought was mine. 2 nights ago, I heard footsteps above me. Slow. Deliberate. The attic has been shut since I arrived. Nailed shut from the inside. The nails are rusted, bent. The wood swells when touched, like it breathes. I've never dared open it, but the footsteps continue. Always after midnight, always the same pattern. 6 steps. Pause. Turn. 6 steps again. Back and forth. Pacing. Measuring. Or maybe rehearsing. I made the mistake of calling out, "Who's there?" and the footsteps stopped. But the hum rose. Louder. Fuller. Not angry. Aware. As if my voice was a cue in a script I didn't know I was acting in. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I found a piece of my journal's binding unthreaded, as if someone, or something, had begun to pull it apart stitch by stitch. Not tear it. Not rip it in rage. Just slowly undo it. Like a mother unraveling a sweater she intends to re-knit differently. As if the house was saying, We'll keep what we want and rebuild you better. But it hadn't taken Abby's name yet. That one still lingered, fragile, but intact. I checked every hour, running my fingers over the letters, whispering them aloud like a spell. It's the only thing that grounds me anymore. Then came the box. I found it in the basement. A part I hadn't explored in weeks because the humidity made the air thick and the concrete sweat under your feet. But something compelled me that day, maybe the quiet, maybe the absence of the hum which had, strangely, stopped for a full hour, the longest silence I'd had in days. The box sat in the center of the floor, too perfect to be forgotten. A square chest, dark wood, no dust. That's what caught my eye. Everything in the basement was coated in that gray fuzz except this. It looked recently placed, like it had arrived with intent. I approached it slowly. No lock, just a sliding panel. I slid it. Inside, neatly folded, were a pair of shoes. My shoes. The same pair I burned in the fireplace 2 weeks ago, after I found them on the front steps, wet and covered in ash. And on top of them, a photograph, one I'd never seen before, of me, sitting at the dining table, smiling, holding the journal in one hand. But it wasn't now. The photo was old, aged, faded, the kind of yellowing you see on pictures left in the sun. My clothes were different. My hair was shorter. The journal looked new. And behind me, in the background through the cracked kitchen doorway, someone was standing, back turned, tall, blurry, wearing my face. I dropped the box, stepped back. The hum returned, so loud it made the basement walls tremble. Dust fell from the beams like dead skin. And then I heard the voice again. Mine, but not from the box, from behind me. You left the door open. I turned. Nothing. But the phrase echoed in my mind like a drumbeat. I didn't leave any doors open. Did I? I ran upstairs, checked every lock, every window, every entry. Everything was sealed. But the attic door was ajar. Just slightly. Not broken open. Not torn apart. Just gently cracked, as if someone had finally finished pacing and decided it was time to come down. I slammed it shut, hammered the nails back in. Each blow made the hum tremble. The house didn't like it. Good. But the damage had been done. Later that night, I found another photograph. This one slipped under my bedroom door. Same angle, same room. Only now, I wasn't smiling. I was crying, mouth open mid-sob, and the journal was gone from my hand. The figure behind me, closer, clearer. It wasn't blurry anymore. It was me, but older, hollowed, eyes too wide, jaw slack. Hands pressed to the doorway like it couldn't step through just yet. But it would. It was getting braver. And with each moment, the hum grew stronger, more layered. Voices underneath it, dozens, maybe more. Some of them mine, some of them strangers, all of them trapped. Echoes layered into that single sound that never stops now. The hum isn't breath, it's memory. Looped, distorted, played back again and again until the house knows it better than you ever did. It's not forgetting me. It's memorizing me, piece by piece, so it can replace me perfectly. I ended the night the only way I know how, by writing Abby's name, again. Louder, harder. Pressed into the page until my pen tore through. Because when the hum gets too loud to fight, the only thing I have left is this, to remind myself that I once knew something true. Something warm. Something mine. And even if the house rewrites me, I'll make sure it never forgets her. It began as a tickle beneath my skin. A soft irritation, like a hair stuck under a bandage or a shirt tag brushing against the wrong place. I ignored it, at first. In a house full of things trying to steal your breath and memory, a small itch barely registers. But by the second day, it was no longer subtle. It had shape, direction. It moved. The sensation ran along my left shoulder blade, tracing a line that curved slightly before hooking inward like the bend of a question mark. It felt deliberate. Too precise to be random. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, twisted awkwardly, and lifted my shirt to see. At first, there was nothing. No bruise, no rash, just skin. But the moment I touched the spot, a sharp sting shot through me, and then I saw it. A scratch, thin, fresh, and not from a fingernail or a splinter. It was etched. Carved, shallow but intentional, like something had traced a message under my skin. The worst part, it wasn't healing. By the next morning, there were two more. Same depth, same angle, parallel to the first, as if something was writing a sentence, one line at a time. The house had stopped whispering in the walls. It had stopped showing me mirrored versions, old photographs, or flickering hallways. Now it was writing on me. That's when I stopped sleeping altogether, not by choice. It wasn't fear this time. It was restlessness. A low, constant buzzing beneath my skin, as if my body no longer belonged entirely to me. I paced for hours, scribbled Abby's name 100 times on a page I eventually burned. Nothing soothed it. The hum returned, deeper now, less like machinery and more like a heartbeat inside the walls, and then came the knocking, not outside. Inside me. I swear, I felt it, from beneath my ribs, like something knocking gently from behind bone, asking to come out. I froze, pressed both palms to my chest, listened, one beat, two, then silence. It never came again, but it didn't need to, because that night I woke to blood, a line of it on the bedsheet, straight and purposeful, not a pool, not a smear, a perfect red curve in the exact shape of the mark on my back. It hadn't bled through my shirt. My skin wasn't torn open, but the blood was there. Like something inside me had whispered out in my sleep. I changed the sheets, burned them. Didn't look back, but I knew what was happening. The house had stopped building versions of me out there. It was building inward now, growing something underneath my skin, writing its script in my muscle, rehearsing me from the inside. The next morning, I found another message, this time written across my bedroom wall in thin black ash, like soot from a burned match, Ale Nostra Ady. And beneath it, in faint scrawl that faded with each hour, we all scratched too. We. The others. The forgotten ones. The people the house had eaten before me. That's what the room without a name was, wasn't it? A graveyard. Not of bodies, but of selves. All stacked behind the walls, filed away like discarded drafts. But something had changed. I wasn't being discarded. I was being kept, refined, finished. And I finally understood why the house never killed me. Because it doesn't want me dead. It wants me compliant. It wants me hollow enough to agree. And the longer I stayed, the easier that was becoming. The memories I once repeated every night like mantras. Abby by the lake, my father's laugh, the way my hands used to tremble when I was happy, those were growing dim. Not gone, not yet, but blurred. Soft around the edges. And each time I touched the scratches, something flared in my mind. Not pain. Recognition. Like I was remembering something I hadn't lived yet. The version of me the house was sculpting had memories too. And the line between mine and his was beginning to vanish. I tried once, just once, to run. I bolted for the front door just before dawn, journal in one hand, Abby's name on my lips. But the porch was gone. Not collapsed, not boarded up, just not there. The front door opened into a hallway I'd never seen, lined with mirrors, every single one reflecting not my face, but his, the copy, the version, the one the house had been carving from my sleep and stitching from my thoughts. He smiled in every reflection, at the same time, and they all whispered together in a chorus that sounded like a lullaby turned inside out. Let us in. You're almost done. I screamed, threw the journal into the mirror. The glass shattered, but nothing changed. The hallway remained, endless, fractured. So I stepped back, closed the door, sat down on the floor and whispered Abby's name again until my throat burned. And now I sit here, writing by candlelight. There are 6 scratches now, curving into a shape I recognize from the house's walls. It's not a word, it's a sigil. A symbol I've seen before, carved into the floor of the mirror room. It means completion. I don't know how much longer I have. I don't know if I'll still be me when this journal runs out. But if you're reading this, if you've found these pages somehow, Remember this: don't trust the versions of yourself the house offers. They don't want freedom, they want your place. And they will scratch and claw and whisper their way in until you hand it over willingly, until you forget how to say no, until you forget you were ever real. The morning arrived without light. The windows, though technically unblocked, showed nothing. No sky, no sun, no sign of time passing. Just a murky gray static, as if the outside world had been reduced to suggestion. I stared out at it for over an hour, waiting for some shift in shadow or shimmer of movement to confirm the day had changed. Nothing came. Time in this house had always been loose, but now it wasn't just slipping, it had stopped pretending altogether. I had the sense then, deep and unshakable, that I was no longer moving forward. Not through days, not through any linear understanding of existence. I wasn't living inside this house. I was repeating inside it. A loop that never quite overlapped, but carried all the familiar echoes. And that's when I saw him again. The version. Not in the mirror this time. Not in some distant photograph, or through a crack in a dream door. He was sitting at my table, just sitting, calm, still, elbows resting gently on the surface, fingers folded together, no smile, no menace, just waiting. As if he'd always belonged there. I didn't scream. Not because I wasn't terrified, I was, but because screaming felt redundant now. The house had broken enough pieces of me that even my terror had its own rhythm. I stood in the doorway, staring at him, every cell in my body screaming to run. He looked up, tilted his head slightly, the same way I do when I'm trying to listen to something very far away. "You stopped writing," he said. His voice wasn't mine anymore. It used to be. But this one had weight, stillness, like it had stopped needing to sound human. I clenched the journal tighter in my hand, unsure whether I should write or hurl it at his head. Maybe both. But he raised his palm and I froze. Not from fear, from recognition. He had the same scar on his hand that I got as a kid from falling off a rusted bike. I never wrote that down. I never told the house. So how could he have it? Unless I'm not the original. Unless I'm the version that stayed. I staggered back a step. My chest tightened. Every memory I'd ever leaned on, every echo of Abby's name, every face I'd whispered into the dark, they all turned soft in that moment. Weak, like pages left in the rain, I began to hyperventilate, and that's when he stood. Calm, measured, he didn't come toward me. He simply placed a hand on the chair he'd vacated and said, "Sit. Let's remember this together." The words hit like a hammer, because somewhere in the back of my head I had sat there before. Not yesterday, not last week, but once, in a room just like this, with walls that hadn't yet peeled, and floors that didn't groan under footsteps that hadn't yet been born. The version that stayed smiled faintly, not cruelly, almost mournfully. "We've done this more times than you think," he said. "You write until your name fades, then I come, then you forget, and then I remember, so you don't have to." I shook my head. "You're not me." He nodded. I wasn't. He said it as if it were a gift, a mercy, and I hated him for it, because he looked so at peace, so finished. The scratches on my back burned then, like they'd been lit with coals. I could feel them pulsing, not just with pain, but with finality. The lines had connected now, no longer random. They formed a single shape, that sigil I kept seeing, etched on walls, burned into dreams. A circle with a crack running through the center. Not a break, an opening. The house was ready, and so was he. He stepped aside, gesturing to the chair. "Once you sit, it'll all make sense." I clenched my fists, took a step toward him, then stopped, because I could see something in his eyes now. A flicker, a hesitation. He was lying, not about the loop, not about the forgetting, but about what happened after the sitting. Because deep down, he wasn't at peace. He was stuck, trapped in a loop of his own making. He wasn't the end. He was just another step. Another layer the house built and discarded, thinking maybe this one will stick. And I realized maybe I was next, not to be erased, but to replace him. I backed away. The version's face didn't change, but his hand twitched, only once, small, barely visible. But it was enough. Enough to know he wasn't in control anymore. He was desperate. And that was all I needed. I turned and ran. Not blindly. I knew where I had to go. The attic. I don't know why. I just knew. I tore through the hall, the walls groaning louder with every step. The hum was back, screaming now. Voices layered over voices, a chorus of names both remembered and forgotten. But I didn't stop. I slammed into the attic ladder, ripped it down, climbed, and for the first time, the attic door didn't resist. It opened, revealing darkness, and something beyond it. Not a room, not a void, but a window. A round, impossible window floating in blackness, framing a sky that didn't belong here. Purple clouds, stars that pulsed in unfamiliar patterns, and at its center a figure, not the version, not me, not even human. It was made of names, whispered names, flickering memories, faces stitched together like patchwork quilt. Laughing, crying, screaming, forgetting. The thing the house truly served, the collector, the memory eater, the god of versions. It looked at me without eyes, and it waited. For what? For me to speak? For me to offer myself? Or to run? I didn't know. So I did the only thing I could. I opened the journal. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't write Abby's name. I didn't write anything at all. I tore the pages out, one by one, screaming as I did, ripping them into pieces, into dust, until all that remained was the cover and a spine too broken to bind anything. And the figure flinched. Only slightly. But it flinched, because that was its mistake. It thought the journal was my anchor, but it never was. The act of remembering was. And by destroying the journal, I was forcing myself to remember alone, with no help, no artifact, no crutch, just me. And if I could do that even for one breath longer, then maybe, just maybe, I was still real. The attic roared, the house howled, the window shattered inwards, and everything went white. When I woke, I was back in the kitchen. The version was gone, the table was empty, the journal was ash, but my name, my real name, was carved into the table, still smoking, still warm, not by me, but by something that saw what I did. The scratches on my back, gone, the hum, silenced. But I know the house isn't finished. Not yet, because the version didn't stay behind. He didn't vanish. He's still somewhere in here, waiting, watching, just like I used to. And someday soon when I forget who I am again, he'll be the one standing in the doorway, asking me to sit. It began again with a reflection that wasn't mine, not in some haunted hallway or the bottom of a coffee mug. It was simple this time, quiet, almost casual. I passed the hallway mirror like I always did, barely glancing. But something pulled at the corner of my attention. Not a sound, not a movement, a difference, a delay. As if my body had moved past the mirror, but my reflection hadn't caught up yet. I stopped, stepped backward, faced it directly, and there I was, standing as I should be, shirt wrinkled, eyes bruised from too little sleep. But something was off. The mirror version blinked at the wrong time. Half a second too late. Not enough for anyone else to notice, maybe. But I noticed. And worse, it smiled. I didn't, it did. And then, slowly, it raised its hand and touched the glass. Not in mimicry, but in recognition. Like it remembered me. Not as I was, but as I used to be. The first version. The original. And suddenly, I understood what the mirror had become. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was memory. Stored, preserved, waiting. The house had been collecting my versions not just to replace me, but to archive me. It was remembering me better than I remembered myself. That night, I ripped the mirror from the wall, smashed it into splinters. But even as I swept the shards into a pile, I could still see pieces of my face in each one, laughing, crying, silent, all wrong, all former. I buried the pieces in the backyard, but when I returned inside, another mirror had appeared. Not hung, not framed. It was just there, on the living room floor. perfectly clean, set at an angle that showed only the ceiling unless you stood over it. And when I did, I saw Abby. Not a memory, not a hallucination. Abby, as clear as if she were standing in front of me. She wasn't looking at me. She was crying, mouthing something. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding, palms against the glass.
Abby!
I shouted. Her head snapped up, her eyes widened, and then she screamed, mouth stretched open, not in fear, but in warning, as if she saw something behind me. I turned. Nothing. Only the house. Only the quiet. When I looked back, the mirror was dark. No Abby. No reflection. Just my own face again, but this time normal. On time. On cue. No delay. I've stopped sleeping again. Because every time I close my eyes, I see mirrors. Not in rooms. In fields. In forests. In oceans. Mirrors scattered across dreamscapes, all showing me, but in pieces. One is younger. One is older. One is dead. And one isn't human anymore. It smiles with teeth too many and too sharp. And it's always reaching. Always stretching toward the edge of the glass. Closer every time. That morning, I found a door I didn't recognize in the basement. Narrow. Covered in plastic sheeting like a renovation never finished. Behind it, I heard dripping. A slow, measured tap, 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 like a leaky faucet over marble. I opened it. Inside was a single room. Every wall lined with mirrors. Floor to ceiling, angled to face one another. An infinite loop of reflections bouncing endlessly. Fracturing until you couldn't tell what was real and what was echo. In the center stood a chair, and sitting in the chair was me. Silent. Pale. Eyes closed. Asleep. Or something worse. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because something told me this version shouldn't wake up. Ever. I slowly stepped back, but the mirrors caught me. Reflected me 1,000 times. And I watched my own mouth open in the glass. Even though mine stayed shut, and all the reflections whispered in unison, we kept the best one. I ran. Up the stairs. Slammed the door. Pushed a shelf against it, but the dripping continued. Not from below anymore. From inside me. That night, I dreamt of Abby again. But this time, she wasn't crying. She was behind glass. Knocking. Trapped in some version of the house I hadn't reached yet. Her voice muffled. But I saw the words she kept mouthing again and again. Remember. Not escape. Not help. Remember. Because maybe that's the only way to fight the house. To remember the true things. The ones it can't imitate. Can't record. Can't store behind glass and spit back at you with wrong eyes and hollow smiles. I woke up with her name on my lips again. Scribbled it on the wall in chalk. Then again in pen. Then again with the last of my candle wax. Because if I forget her, even for a moment, then maybe the version in the chair becomes me. And maybe the house finally gets what it wants. Not a body, not a soul, just a perfect memory. Trapped, preserved, played forever on the inside of glass that never forgets. So I keep writing. Even when my hand trembles. Even when the mirrors grow from the floor like weeds. Even when the voice from the basement calls itself by my name. Because the moment I stop, the moment I believe the version smiling back is really me, that's when I disappear. The house has lungs. I know that now. Not metaphorically. Not in the poetic way of saying it feels alive. I mean it breathes. Not through the walls or the vents, but through the floor. I only discovered it because I dropped a glass and bent down to pick up the shards. And then I heard it. Inhalation. Deep and slow, like someone beneath the boards was taking in a massive breath, the kind that fills the chest so full it aches. I froze. The glass sliced my hand, but I didn't feel it. All I could do was listen. Exhale. Not a gust. Not a breeze. A long, rattling sigh that made the nails in the floor creak and the baseboards twitch. I pressed my ear against the hardwood. There was no mistaking it. The house was alive, and something under it was restless. After that moment, the house changed. Not visually. The walls were still chipped. The doors still drifted slightly open when left alone, but the pressure shifted. I couldn't walk without feeling a give beneath my feet. Slight, subtle, but there, like stepping on a mattress with just enough resistance to remind you it's not solid. I tested it, stomped once in the hallway. The floor gave in half an inch, and I swear the breath caught, like I'd startled something mid-dream. I didn't do it again. That night, I didn't sleep on the bed. I couldn't. The bed was bolted to the floor, and now I understood why. Instead, I sat in the corner of the room, back against the wall, journal in my lap, candle barely flickering. I counted the breaths. 7 seconds inhale, 10 seconds exhale. Steady, predictable, like a sleeping giant. And then, on the 34th cycle, it changed. A pause. Then a hiccup in the rhythm. A sharp inhale, no exhale. I stood up. Not by choice. Something in my chest panicked, screamed, move. I ran to the hall just as a crack split across the floorboards where I'd stood earlier. It wasn't loud. It didn't explode. It opened, like a mouth. Inside, darkness. Not just absence of light, colorless, depthless. The kind of dark that swallows thoughts whole. And from within it, a voice rose. Not mine, not Abby's, not even human. It said one word. Closer. I slammed my bedroom door and backed away, heart racing, blood roaring in my ears. I could still hear the breath, louder now, irregular. The floor quivered under my feet. Whatever the house had been trying to grow, to mold me into, it was finally ready to consume. This wasn't about memory anymore. This was feeding, not with mouths, with space, with presence. I slept in the bathtub that night, wrapped in towels. Ear to porcelain. It was the only place I couldn't hear it breathe. But I still felt it. Through the pipes. Through the drain. It was beneath everything. The next morning, the crack in the hallway had sealed. No dust. No splinters. Just smooth wood. Like it had never opened at all. But I could still hear the breath when I walked over it. Shorter now. Hungrier. The house was growing impatient. I tried to leave. Again. Not to escape. Just to see if I could. But the front door had grown cold. Not like ice. Like metal left in the ground for too long. Ancient. Tempered by years of silence. I touched the knob and it burned me. Not with heat, but memory. A flash. Abby. Her hand in mine. Her face wet with rain. Her voice saying, "This place isn't done with you." And then it was gone. My skin sizzled where the knob had touched it. Not a burn. A mark. Same shape as the sigil. Same curve as the scratches that used to dance across my back. Only this time it wasn't hidden. The house wanted me to see it. To wear it. Because it had claimed me. And that's when I understood the breathing wasn't the house's. It was mine. The version that replaced me hadn't come from mirrors or doors or dreamlike loops. It had been built from inside, over time. And now, every step I took, every word I forgot, fed it. It was forming in the space between my bones, and it was beginning to breathe on its own. I locked myself in the attic that night, the only room that felt separate. The air was thinner up there, dry, unfed. No mirrors, no cracks. Just insulation and old boxes filled with clothes that weren't mine and letters never addressed to anyone. I sat in the corner and waited, counted again, 7 seconds in, 10 seconds out, until I heard a second rhythm, softer, shorter, inside me, like lungs learning how to work. Like something practicing being alive. I opened the journal and scrawled a single line, "I'm not alone in this body anymore." Then I added another, "One of us has to go." I don't know how to kill a thing made of breath and memory. But I know this: if I don't stop it, it will wear my skin, speak in my voice, and live out a version of my life I never chose. And the worst part, no one will ever know the difference. Not even me. It started whispering from beneath the staircase 3 nights ago. The sound wasn't new. This house has whispered since the moment I arrived. But this time it was different. It didn't come from the walls or the mirrors or even the floors. It came from below the stairs themselves. A place I thought I knew. A crawl space I'd looked into once and dismissed. Too small to hide in. Too empty to explore. But now it had a voice. A real one. It wasn't hissing or groaning or humming. It was speaking. And it used my name, soft at first. tentative, like a child trying out a forbidden word. I pressed my ear to the wall just beneath the banister, listened, and there it was again. My name spoken slow, like each letter mattered. It didn't sound like me, or Abby, or anyone I remembered. It sounded new, like something that had never needed to speak until now. So I asked it a question. Who are you? The answer didn't come in a word, but a sound, a low, shivering exhale that vibrated through the wood and into my jaw. Not a breath this time, a release, like something had been holding its voice back for too long. Later that night, I heard scratching, not random, rhythmic, not at the base of the stairs, but inside them, as if something was carving. I ran my fingers along the risers in the dark, letting my touch guide me, and there, at the third step, was a gouge, just one at first, but by morning there were 5, and they formed letters, not symbols, letters. My name again. The same name burned into the journal. The same one I used to remind myself I was real. But it was different this time. The last letter was wrong, not a misspelling, an intention. The tail of the Y curled up instead of down, spiraling into a loop that resembled the mark on my hand. I tried to scrape it off. The wood wouldn't break. I tried to paint over it. The paint flaked immediately. It wanted to be seen. The house was rebranding me, not replacing, not duplicating, rewriting. That night, I dreamt of the stairs, only they weren't stairs anymore. They were teeth, rows and rows of jagged, wooden molars stretching into a tunnel that went down, deeper than the basement, deeper than any place I'd walked. And at the end of that tunnel, something was waiting, not standing, not crouched, just waiting. It had my eyes, but it didn't blink. When I woke, I was on the stairs, not at the top, not the bottom, middle, lying across them like I'd fallen or been placed there. My head rested on the 4th step, the one above the gouged letters. My hand was splayed open, palm up, and in my skin, right at the center, a new line had been drawn in blood. Not a cut, not pain, more like ink, the sigil again. It was growing. That entire day, the stairs moaned when I crossed them. Not from weight, from recognition. I swear it. Each step sounded different. Higher, lower, almost like tones being played on a piano that only knew one song me. I opened the crawl space again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I crawled in with a flashlight clenched in my teeth, dust thick in my throat. It went further back than I remembered. 20 feet, maybe more. And at the very end, under a thin sheet of rotting canvas, was something soft. I pulled the covering back. It was a mattress. Tiny, molded to the shape of a curled-up body. Next to it, a pile of notebooks. Not blank, not empty. Each one filled with my handwriting. Pages and pages of entries I'd never written, memories I didn't have, years' worth. Childhood moments, birthdays, a wedding I'd never attended. A funeral I don't remember grieving. And on the last page of the top notebook, one line, "You've been here longer than you remember." I backed out, fast, breath tight, knees scraped. But the whispering followed me now, clinging to my back like wet cloth. The stairs no longer felt like passage. They felt like residence. Like something was living in them, watching me walk up and down, learning the rhythm of my footsteps, so it could one day take them for its own. Tonight, I heard footsteps on the stairs while I was in the kitchen. Slow, unmistakable, but when I rushed in, the staircase was empty. Except the door to the crawl space was slightly ajar, and carved across the bottom step, fresh and deep, almost hollow. I locked myself in the guest room, piled furniture against the door, tried to burn the notebooks, but they wouldn't catch. The pages curled, the ink bubbled, but nothing turned to ash. They're still on the floor, waiting. Just like the thing under the stairs, because the house doesn't want me to run anymore. It wants me to sink into the version it's shaping, into the stories I never lived but now can't deny. Because the more I read, the more I start to remember. And that's the most dangerous part. Not the breathing, not the mirrors, not the marks. The familiarity. The ease with which I say, oh, yeah, I think that did happen. But it didn't. I know it didn't. Didn't it? I keep whispering Abby's name like a lifeline over and over again. But even that's changing. The sound feels off in my mouth, like it belongs to someone else now, like it never belonged to me in the first place. And tomorrow, I know what I'll find. That sixth step. The one I've never stepped on in my sleep. It'll have a name carved into it. Just one. Mine. I saw a door where there wasn't one before. It appeared overnight, or maybe it had always been there, and I'd simply failed to see it. Tucked at the end of a hallway I'd walked 100 times, past the rusted radiator, and the light switch that never worked, it sat between the walls like a secret. Matte black, no handle, no hinges, just a frame etched into plaster. Too tall for the ceiling it touched, and too narrow for anything human to walk through. I stared at it for what felt like hours. I didn't knock, didn't speak. I just watched. And the longer I did, the more I realized the wall around the door was breathing. Not pulsing or vibrating, breathing. Slow, steady movement like the rise and fall of a chest beneath bedsheets. Every breath from the house seemed to feed it. And with every inhale, the outline of the door deepened, like it was being pushed outward from within. I didn't touch it, not then, because that door wasn't meant to be opened. It was meant to open itself. By the second day, the hallway changed. It no longer ended. I walked it for 7 minutes without reaching the radiator. The air got colder, heavier. I felt it in my teeth. And when I turned to go back, the house had rearranged. The exit was gone. Only the door remained. And this time it was open. No sound, no swing, just open. A sliver, enough to see inside. And what I saw turned my stomach to water. It was my bedroom, perfectly replicated. Same bed, same drawer, same photograph of Abby with the folded corner. But it was wrong. The colors didn't match. The shadows fell backward. And worse, everything moved. Slightly, like the room breathed on its own. I stepped in, because of course I did. That's what the house wanted. And because the truth is, part of me hoped this was the real room, the one I'd lost in the shuffle of shifting floors and forgotten dreams. Maybe this was my place again. Maybe I could sleep here and reset everything. But as I crossed the threshold, my ears popped, loudly, painfully. Like descending into deep water too fast. The door shut behind me. No sound. Just sudden absence. I reached for the knob that didn't exist. And then I turned around. The room was no longer my bedroom. It was the first room I ever remembered. A nursery, lit in soft yellow, with wooden blocks and a crib too small for any adult memory. And I realized something then. This wasn't a room. It was a memory trap. Every corner I turned, the room shifted again. My childhood home. The hallway where I first kissed Abby. The rain-soaked car where I screamed at my father the night he told me I was too much like her. The room bled time. It peeled back layers of me like old wallpaper, and in each version there was a mirror. Not large, just enough to catch my eyes as I passed, but my reflection never matched. Sometimes I looked older, sometimes younger. Once, just once, I saw nothing at all. That's when the lights went out. No flicker. No warning. One moment, there was form and color and depth, and the next, void. I couldn't see my hands. I couldn't hear my breath. But I could feel someone behind me, not standing. Staring. The air got thick. The space between seconds widened. Then a voice spoke. It was mine. But not quite. Like hearing a recording of yourself you don't remember making. Do you remember your first sleep? It asked. I tried to speak, but my tongue was glued to my teeth. Not the memory of sleep, it continued. The first time you surrendered. The first time you stopped resisting the dark. Something brushed my shoulder, cold, wet. I was born there, it whispered. In the stillness between your first dream and your first forgetting, and then silence again. Total. I stumbled forward, arms out, reaching for anything. And then my fingers found a wall, flat, dry, warm. I followed it inch by inch, until I hit a corner. then another, and another. I was trapped in a perfect square. No door, no window, no exit. Only a memory of one. I screamed. Nothing came out. I beat my fists against the wall until I felt skin split, bone crack. Still nothing changed. Until the room sighed. Just once. Like a held breath released. And a crack opened in the wall. Narrow. Unlit, I crawled through it, blind, bleeding, and emerged back into the house. Into a room I'd never seen before, but one that knew me. There was a bed. And on the bed, my journal. Open to a page I hadn't written yet. The ink was still wet. It said, "Now you know what waits behind the door that doesn't exist." I should have felt relief, but all I felt was emptier, as if the room hadn't let me go, but taken something from me in trade. A sliver of memory, a sliver of self, and in its place, a thought that wasn't mine. "You're almost ready to stay." I burned the page, tore it free and lit it with a match. But when I turned to leave, the door was back. That same black frame, still open, still breathing, and from deep within, I heard my voice again. Only this time it was singing. A lullaby I hadn't heard since childhood. The one Abby used to hum when she wanted me to forget the worst things. I dropped to my knees, clutched the floor like it could save me. But I knew the truth now. The room had only begun, and it would open again. Because the house doesn't keep memories. It consumes them, one version at a time. It began staring through the window on the 26th night. Not watching, staring. As if sight wasn't its goal. As if all it wanted was to exist at the edge of vision. Long enough for my mind to start unraveling at the seams. I noticed it just before dawn, the time when the world slips briefly into that colorless moment between night and morning. That's when shapes betray you, when shadows invent themselves. But this shape didn't invent itself. It was real. It stood just beyond the glass in the kitchen. Still, tall. A silhouette that wasn't shaped like anything I could name. A little too narrow in the shoulders. A little too long in the limbs. It didn't move. Not even when I walked right up to the window and stood inches from it. Not even when I whispered, "Who are you?" And I swear to God, it smiled. Not in a way I could see. In a way I felt. Like a grin was being pressed against the inside of my skull. Wide and quiet and full of teeth that had never chewed anything human. I should have looked away. I should have closed the curtain and never looked back. But instead, I pressed my hand to the glass. Just to see if it would mimic me. It didn't. Its arms stayed down. But the glass got warm. Like it had touched back invisibly. That day, I boarded up the window. Hammered wood over the frame, nailed each corner shut. But that night, when I returned to the kitchen, the boards were gone. Not broken, not scattered, just gone. As if they'd been gently unfastened and folded back into the walls they came from. The glass was clean. Too clean. Like it had never been touched. But the thing was still there, now closer. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor with the lights off, knees pulled to my chest, watching the window and trying not to blink. I told myself if I didn't blink, it couldn't move. But I blinked anyway, and when I did, it was inside, not next to me, not behind me, inside the glass, not a reflection, not a shadow. It had stepped into the thickness of the pane, living now between the inner and outer layers. I could see its outline swimming just beneath the surface, like something preserved in amber, suspended in a half place. Waiting. I didn't dare touch it. I backed away. I left the room. I locked the door. It didn't matter. The next day, it was in every window, bathroom, bedroom, hallway. Even the tiny pane of glass in the attic that had never once shown sunlight. Every one of them had a smudge now, shaped like a face leaning too close. And each smudge was slightly different. Some smiled, some frowned. One was crying. One had its mouth open, so wide the smudge smeared across the entire window like a scream that had shattered mid-sound. They weren't the same thing. I realized they were versions of it, of me, of everything this house had ever tried to keep. And somehow, They'd all gotten trapped between the glass. That night, I couldn't take it. I smashed one, took a fire poker, and drove it into the largest window in the living room, shattered it into 1,000 glittering shards. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt relief. No eyes, no smudges, just cold air and silence, until I turned around. The broken shards had embedded in the walls, the floor, the mirror, and in every piece the thing watched me. 1,000 eyes, all open, all blinking in unison, all smiling. I fell to the floor and screamed into my hands, and in that moment, I felt the window inside me crack. Not real glass, something deeper, a pain in the mind, a partition between memory and madness, and I swear, I felt it splinter. The next day, I avoided the windows. I walked blind through the house, tracing the walls with my fingers, whispering Abby's name over and over again, trying to find the real places again, the ones untouched by the gaze. There weren't many left, but I found one, the basement. Cold, damp, silent. No windows, no glass, just dark, solid stone. And when I got there I wept, not from fear, but relief, until I turned on my flashlight and saw it. In the far wall, a mirror, 6 feet tall, framed in rusted silver, covered with a sheet I never placed, and in the dust at its base, footprints. Bare, facing the mirror, leading nowhere, like someone had stepped into it and never come back out. I stood in front of it for hours, not moving, barely breathing, trying to decide if that's where I was supposed to go, if that's where Abby went, if that's where all the versions of me ended up. Maybe that's what the house wants. Not just to trap you in a loop or replace your name. Maybe it wants to flatten you, to make you two-dimensional, memory pressed into reflection, nothing more than an echo in glass. Staring back at the next poor soul who leans too close, I didn't lift the sheet, not yet. But I know I will, because the thing in the window is no longer outside. It's inside now, not in the mirrors, not in the glass. In me, watching, waiting, smiling. Because soon I'll blink, and when I open my eyes I won't be here. I'll be on the other side of that glass, watching, waiting, smiling back. It began with the laughter. Not loud, not mocking, faint. As if someone stood just behind the plaster, listening to my every breath, every footstep, and chuckling quietly to themselves. At first, I thought it was my mind unraveling again. I even told myself it was wind, or maybe the wood settling, even though it never sounded like wood. Wood creaks, wind howls. But this was the unmistakable sound of amusement, muffled, patient, like the house thought something was funny about me. I tried ignoring it. That worked for a day. But the laughter grew bolder. I'd hear it when I closed the fridge door, when I knocked over a book, when I stubbed my toe and cursed out loud. Always the same, a brief hush, then that gentle, rustling sound of someone barely containing their glee. And soon it wasn't just one voice, it was many, laughing in unison, like an audience watching a play only they understood. That's when I pressed my ear to the wall, and they shushed, not one voice, all of them. Instant silence, as if they knew, as if they were aware I'd figured it out. I whispered, "I can hear you," and they replied, not with words, but movement. A long, slow scratch across the inside of the wall, like fingernails dragging across old wallpaper. Then came the thudding. Low, rhythmic, like someone gently knocking from inside the studs, timing it to my heartbeat. That night, I walked the house with every light on. I tapped walls. Knocked. Waited. They never answered when I wanted them to. Only when I wasn't ready. At 3:12 a.m., I heard a knock from inside the wall behind my bed, just once. A single, deliberate thump. Then a whisper, as clear as anything I've ever heard. "You're saying all the right things." I didn't sleep. Couldn't. The next morning, I found something I hadn't written on the living room wall. A sentence, scrawled in thick, uneven pencil strokes. "They like the sound of you." That was the first time I saw them. Not fully. Just pieces, from the corners of my eyes, through the seams of doors. Movement where no movement should be. Thin shapes. too long in the arms. No faces. One of them had a neck that bent twice. They didn't touch me. They just watched, from inside the walls. The house had never felt so aware. I started speaking out loud just to fill the silence. Not to myself, to them. Telling them stories, nonsense, old memories, recipes I barely remembered from childhood. At first, it felt insane, but they listened, and somehow I could feel it. The house got warmer, softer, almost like it approved. I should have stopped, but I didn't. I started reading them my journal. All the entries about Abby, about the mirrors, the versions of me, the dreams, and that's when they began to answer. Not with words, with echoes. I'd say something, and the next day I'd find it written somewhere new, on a door frame, behind a cabinet. Once, carved into the soap, they were reflecting me now, learning me. Every word I spoke became a seed they planted, and the garden was blooming fast. Then came the door. Different from the others. This one wasn't visible at first, but I could feel it in the far back corner of the upstairs hallway. There was a draft, soft and rhythmic, like breath, and when I pressed my hand against the wallpaper, it was warm. Peeling it back revealed a seam, not a door in the traditional sense, just a vertical line, faint as a scar, etched in old plaster. I pushed. It opened. Inside was a room no larger than a closet, and all along the walls ears. Dozens of them, some human, some not. All molded from the surface itself. No seams, no signs of sculpting, like the house had grown them. Some were puckered shut. Others were open, twitching slightly as if straining to hear every word I hadn't yet said. At the center of the room sat a chair, and on the chair my journal, open to a page I didn't remember writing. It said, "Don't stop." They're almost ready. I backed out, shut the door, tried to pretend it wasn't there. But now the ears are everywhere. Not visible, but I know when they're near. The air changes. My voice feels heavier when I speak. My thoughts get foggy, like the house is reaching through the walls and pressing its fingers into the back of my brain, gently turning the dial. Even silence isn't safe anymore, because now, even when I think, I feel the presence shift, as if they've learned how to listen beneath sound, as if they've learned how to hear thoughts. And the laughter's back. Only it isn't muffled now. It's in the vents, in the pipes, in the gap between door and frame. And it's no longer amused, it's hungry. I tried writing a new set of rules, something to ground me, to fight back. But when I flipped open the journal, they were already written. Not in my hand, not in my ink, but in blood. 1. Don't say your real name aloud. 2. Don't think of the things you miss. 3. Don't trust a sound you didn't make. 4. If the walls go silent, run. Because the house doesn't just breathe anymore. It listens, and I think soon it will want to speak back. It called my name this morning. Not the name I wear now, the one I've repeated into the mirror just to remind myself I'm still here. But the first name, the one I never told anyone in this house. The one I buried in childhood and forgot how to say aloud. I heard it while brushing my teeth, casual and crisp, whispered just above the hum of the bathroom light. The voice didn't echo. It didn't come from a direction. It came from inside the sound, inside the buzz of the bulb, inside the hush of water down the drain. Like the house had finally found the frequency of my soul. I froze, let the toothbrush fall. My mouth still foamed, jaw slack with recognition, because I knew that voice. It was mine, only older. Drier, like it had spent centuries whispering to no one, waiting to speak again. The silence that followed was sharp, not empty, expectant. I backed out of the bathroom, not taking my eyes off the mirror, which had begun to fog around the edges despite the cold air. As the mist spread, shapes bloomed behind it, mouths. Not faces, just mouths all open, all mid-syllable. No sound came out, just that same impossible pressure, like noise held back by something far larger than silence. I left the room, but the voice followed. Not aloud, not through the house. Through me, my thoughts slowed, my tongue felt heavier. Words began to rearrange themselves in my head. Phrases I didn't remember learning, memories narrated by someone else. I'd walk into a room and forget why I came in, only to find my lips moving as if telling an invisible audience what I saw: a table with one chair, a photograph turned face down, a smell like dust and forgetting. I wasn't speaking, but something was using my mouth. I began recording myself without knowing why. Hours of tape. Playback revealed things I didn't remember saying. Phrases in languages I didn't know. Descriptions of places I'd never been but somehow felt. In one recording, I say she watches from the fold in the hallway where the wallpaper bubbles. She's counting your blinks. Abby's name appears in none of them. Not once. Only she, only you. I tried writing instead, but my hand twitched. Fought. Pen scraped through page until the words looked like they were bleeding. One phrase over and over. The voice you trust is only a shadow. I stopped writing. Stopped speaking. Hoped that silence might starve it. But the voice adapted. It started using the walls again. Whispers that sounded like echoes, but weren't. Snippets of things I'd never said but knew were meant for me. Breathe slower. She's almost here. Don't let her wear your face. And worst of all, you were always the echo, never the origin. That one undid me. I couldn't move for hours after hearing it, because some part of me knew it was true. The memories I have of my childhood, Abby's laughter, the old family house, the lake, the attic. I've never once remembered them without narrating them to myself. Like I wasn't remembering at all. Like I was repeating. Like they were fed to me. What if I'm not the one who lived them? What if I'm just the one retelling them? A vessel shaped by repetition. A mouth that speaks stories someone else wrote. I went back to the mirror. This time, I didn't fog it up. I stood there, still, silent, and waited. At first my reflection stayed put, normal, but then it blinked out of rhythm, only slightly, subtle enough that most people wouldn't have caught it. But I did, I always do. It blinked before I did. Twice, like it was reacting to someone else. Then it smiled, not with lips, with teeth, a widening of the mouth too sharp to be human. Then it whispered, no sound, just movement of the mouth. But I understood. Not through sound. Through understanding. It said she's listening now. I staggered back, but the floor buckled beneath me. Just for a second. Just enough to send me crashing into the hallway, where the lights were flickering. Not from faulty wiring, but rhythmically. Like Morse code. Like a conversation in pulses of light. And in the strobing, I saw her. Abby. Only she wasn't whole. Pieces missing. Parts flickering like bad video. Her hands hung at the wrong angle. Her jaw didn't move, but I heard her. Clear. Sharp. Don't trust the one who sounds like you. Then she vanished. And the light blew out. I sat in darkness for what could have been minutes or hours. Only the sound of breath, not mine, from the walls, from the floors, from inside. And underneath that, buried in it, the voice again. Not whispering now. Chanting. My name, my real name, over and over, soft, insistent, like a prayer that only works if you forget who you really are. I don't say it aloud anymore. I don't answer to it. Because I think that's how they get in. Through your name. Through the self you believe is yours. The voice behind the voice wants more than memory. It wants ownership. Of the sound of you. Of the shape of your words. Of the space you take up in the world. And if I speak too much longer, if I write another word, I fear I'll only be echoing what it already said. So tonight, I'll go silent. But not because I'm afraid. Because I need to listen. To see if the voice hesitates when I stop. To see if it needs me. Because if it does, I still have one weapon left. The only thing that's mine, my refusal to speak. It finally caught up to me, sleep. Not the kind that sneaks up and steals a few hours from an overworked body. Not exhaustion or collapse. This was deeper, heavier. It didn't ask for permission. It descended. Like a fog crawling down into my bones. I didn't even make it to the bed. I was at the foot of the stairs, knees drawn to my chest, trying to stay awake when the world folded. No warning, no dreams. Just that moment when my eyes dropped and never opened again. Not in the way they should have. The first thing I saw in that sleep wasn't light or darkness. It was Abby, standing at the edge of a wooden dock that floated in the middle of an empty field. No water. Just the dock and the smell of wet wood that didn't belong. She turned to me slowly, like she had all the time in the world. Her eyes didn't blink. Her mouth didn't move. But I heard her. Now you're where it hides. I stepped forward. The field was soft underfoot, too soft. Like moss covering a mouth. Each step I took sounded muted, like the ground was listening, like it didn't want to be heard. I reached the dock. She was gone, but something else stood in her place now. Not a person. Not even a shape I could name. Just an outline, darker than the rest of the dream. A void in the shape of a man, standing with its back to me, and from it came the sounds. Whispers layered over whispers, overlapping in languages I don't understand but somehow remember. Not knowledge. Memory. Like I'd heard them in my crib, in the moment before birth, or long before I had a name at all. The figure stepped off the dock, and didn't fall. It walked into the air, into nothingness, each step echoing like thunder wrapped in water. And I followed, because in dreams, curiosity has no safety switch. As I moved, the world changed. No longer a field. Now a hallway. Endless. Identical to the upstairs hallway in the house. But every door was open, and behind each one me. Different versions. Different lives. One sat on the floor carving words into their own leg with a dull knife. One lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling with pupils blown wide. One was rocking gently, repeating, "She wore my voice. She wore my voice." And every version turned toward me when I passed, not to reach out or plead. They just watched, expressionless, like they were cataloging me. I couldn't speak. My mouth wouldn't move, so I ran, but there was no wind in that place, no movement, just endless observation. The longer I ran, the more rooms I passed, and each version of me became more wrong. Stretched, distorted, limbs too long, eyes too many. Mouth sealed with stitching that vibrated like strings on a violin being pulled by breath. Finally, the hallway ended. A mirror stood at the center of a rotunda with 7 doors, each marked with a number and a color I've never seen outside of dreams. I approached the mirror, but I didn't see myself. I saw Abby, trapped inside. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't afraid. She looked empty. Not sad, not angry, just absent, as if something had poured her out and left the shell intact. Behind her, shadows moved, not threatening, just curious. They watched her the way scientists might watch a flame in a jar, fascinated, detached. I raised my hand to the mirror, and Abby blinked, once, and mouthed, "You're not dreaming." The glass cracked, a single fracture down the center, and from the edge of the dream, if it even was a dream, came a sound. Not screaming, not music. It was the voice behind the voice again. Only now, it wasn't whispering, it was chanting. My name, my first name, the one only Abby knew. The one I'd never said inside this house. It pulled at me, dragged me backwards. And just before I snapped out of that impossible place, I saw a new version of myself step through one of the 7 doors. This one looked at home. It smiled, sat on the floor, and waited. I woke gasping, covered in sweat that smelled like burning paper. The floor beneath me was warm. The walls murmured. Not loud enough to make out, but just enough to feel the vibration behind my ears. Like a warning delivered by a mother who's long since stopped raising her voice. I checked my journal. A new entry had been added in my handwriting. The sleep doesn't come from you. It comes for you. Underneath it, smaller each time you return. You bring more of it back. I shut the journal. I haven't slept since. Because now, every time I close my eyes, I see her, Abby, in the mirror, behind the glass, and she's mouthing something new. I don't know what it is yet, but I think it's a warning, or worse, a plea. because she knows what I'm starting to accept. This sleep, it's not a place you visit. It's a location. A room in the house you don't remember walking into. And one day, you don't wake up on the floor anymore. You wake up inside it, behind the glass, with the shadows, waiting for the next version of you to arrive. I didn't choose to go down there. Not at first. The staircase appeared overnight, wedged between two rooms that had never touched before, splitting the house like a scar carved into muscle. It wasn't there yesterday. I would have remembered it. A staircase like that doesn't hide. It drips with wrongness. Each step narrower than the last. Each railing twist warped, bending in curves that defy architecture and reason. And the way it slopped. It wasn't just going downward. It was spiraling, coiling like something trying to get in rather than lead out. I stood at the top for hours, listening. There was no sound. But the silence had weight. It leaned into my ears, invited me in. And then, the house shifted. I don't know how to describe it. One moment, I was standing still. The next, I felt off balance. As if the floor had tilted ever so slightly. Not enough to knock me over, just enough to nudge me. My foot slipped, only by an inch. But that inch was enough. My body leaned forward. My hand reached for the railing, and the staircase took me. Not violently, not with speed, just steady movement, like an escalator in reverse. The steps moved beneath me, not down, but inward. And I realized, I wasn't walking. The stairs were moving me. They pulsed with each breath the house took. Each step beneath my feet thrummed like a heartbeat. I turned around to climb back up, but the top was gone. No light, no opening, just more stairs behind me, and then I heard it, my voice. Above me, far above now, an echo I couldn't chase. Don't look at the walls. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't imagination. It was a command, a desperate one. But of course, I looked. Because that's what this place wants. And the walls, God, the walls weren't walls. They were faces, thousands of them. Some pressed so close they bulged through the plaster like breath against plastic. Others recessed, screaming silently through layers of crumbling brick. They didn't blink, they didn't move, but they watched, each one with my eyes, different versions, aged, broken, smiling, dead, each frozen in a loop of fear or joy or sorrow or something else entirely. One of them began mouthing a phrase on repeat. I leaned closer, but the moment my face was inches from the wall, its eyes snapped open, and it breathed me in. Just a gasp. Not enough to take all of me. Just enough to steal a thought. A good one. I don't know which thought it was, but I haven't felt it since. That version of me smiled as I stumbled back, content like it had won something. The stairs moved faster. I tried to stop. Tried to grab the railing, but it burned cold, too cold. And I let go. I fell to my knees. Then the voice returned. From below this time. Not mine, not Abby's. A third voice. One I've never heard and yet know too well. It said there is no bottom. Only the next floor you forget. And then the walls began to bleed. Not with blood, but light. Amber and thick, oozing in rivulets down the cracks between each face. Some of the faces drank it in. Others wept. And I understood. This staircase wasn't a descent in space. It was a descent in self. Each level down stripped something. A memory. A sound. A name. I reached a landing that wasn't there a moment ago. A door waited at its center. Old. Peeling. And on it, scratched deep in frantic strokes, was the word H-E-R. Not Abby. Not she. Just H-E-R. Like even the house didn't dare name her now. I opened the door, and there she stood. Back to me. Hair wet. Clothes unmoving, like she'd stepped out of a photograph. I couldn't see her face. Couldn't see if it was Abby or the version the house had crafted. But I knew it was both. It turned slowly. No footsteps. Just a shift of space. And when I finally saw her face, it was mine. Not mirrored. Not distorted. Perfect. Except the eyes. They weren't mine. They weren't Abby's. They were the house's. Empty, except for the reflection of the staircase behind me. I asked, "What do you want from me?" She smiled. not cruelly, almost sadly, and said, "I'm what's left when you finally give up." Then she reached into her chest and pulled out a key, made of glass, cracked, bleeding light like the walls. She handed it to me, pressed it into my palm, and whispered, "Use this on the door at the top." "There is no top," I said. She just looked past me and said, "Then you haven't gone far enough." I turned to ask more, but she was gone. No exit, no door, just stairs. And the moment I stepped back onto them, they reversed, began carrying me up, faster this time, walls smooth again, no faces, no blood, just silence. When I emerged back into the house, I collapsed, my legs numb, my hand still clutching the key, and etched into my skin, where I held it too tightly, were the words, "Don't forget the way down, because that staircase is not done with me. And one day, it will appear again, in a different place, a new door, and I'll have to choose, go back down, or find out what happens when the top isn't where you left it." It began with the floorboards. I was pacing late one night, tracing the hallway for the 100th time, when I noticed one of the floorboards didn't creak the same way it used to. It had always made a high, pitched squeal near the baseboard, a small defect in the wood I'd grown used to. But now it was hollow, not just quiet, wrong. I stepped again, slower this time, pressing down with the edge of my foot. A low knock replied from beneath, like something responding, not echoing. I crouched, knocked once. It knocked back. Twice. I didn't move for nearly 5 minutes. I just stared at the floor, feeling it breathe, wondering how long this part of the house had been alive. Not metaphorically, alive. It pulsed when I touched it, like it had veins. And the knock hadn't been a sound caused by my pressure. It had been a choice. The next morning, the board was gone. Not removed, not displaced. Gone. Where it had been was now a square hole, about the width of my shoulders, leading down into blackness that shimmered with heat. I should have left it alone. But you don't live this long with a house like this and still believe that walking away is a choice. So I descended. No ladder. No stairs. Just floor, then no floor. I fell. Not for long. Maybe 2 seconds. I landed softly, as though the space had caught me, like a mother catching a child she never wanted. It wasn't a basement. It wasn't even below the house. It was another house. Inside this one. Identical in shape, in rooms, in layout, but wrong. The walls were too narrow. The ceilings too low. The light fixtures were the exact same design, but flickered with a sickly green hue that stung the corners of my vision. And the sounds. There were sounds. Not whispers this time. No voices. Just motion. Doors swinging open down the hall when I wasn't looking. Footsteps in the ceiling that followed wherever I went. Like something was crawling above me, tracing my path. I called out, once. Not a name, just a sound, to see what would happen. The house replied. Not in sound, in structure. The walls folded behind me, gently, blocking the hole I'd come through. I was inside, trapped. Inside the house, beneath the house. I walked room to room, looking for a seam, a passage, anything to climb back. Every door I opened led to the same room. A bedroom, my childhood bedroom. Not similar, identical. Down to the scratch on the left leg of the dresser. The stuffed rabbit with the missing eye. The stain on the ceiling from a leak that never got fixed. But every time I turned around, something changed. The rabbit moved. The stain grew. The dresser lost a drawer. It was degrading in real time. Like the memory was rotting around me. I stood in the center of the room, afraid to move, and whispered Abby's name. And then I heard her. Not a scream, not a sob. Childlike, from beneath the bed, I crouched slowly, and saw a shadow there, pressed deep into the floorboards like someone had been flattened beneath them. Its face turned toward me. But it wasn't Abby. It wasn't even me. It was something in between, a shape trying on both faces like masks. And in that moment I realized this house isn't haunted. I am, not by ghosts, by echoes. Of all the things I've said, all the lies I've told myself, all the truths I refuse to see, This structure beneath the floorboards, this house within the house, it feeds on those echoes. It builds with them. Each time I deny something, it becomes a brick. Each time I bury a memory, it becomes a wall. And I've buried so much. I tried smashing the mirror on the closet door. It didn't break. It didn't reflect either. It showed the upstairs hallway, but empty. No dust, no age, just stillness. Then I saw something move in the mirror. Me, only I wasn't looking at the glass. I was walking past it. Upstairs. Now. Which meant the version of me up there hadn't come down here at all. It was continuing life. Without me, I was the one who stayed behind. I stepped back, heart racing. The house heard. It reacted. A breath exhaled from the walls. The ceiling cracked, and flakes of paint fell like ash. The closet door swung open, and there, at the back of it, behind the hanging shirts and old boxes, was a hallway. New. Fresh. Lit by a single bare bulb that swung, though there was no breeze. I stepped through. At the end of the hall was a door. On it, etched with something sharp and shaking, were the words, "She needs your face now." I touched the handle. It was warm. Alive. And just before I turned it, I heard me, the version of me still upstairs, call out from the far end of the hall. I turned, and for one horrible moment, we locked eyes. He looked scared, more scared than I've ever felt. Then he opened his mouth and screamed.
"To open, IT!"
But I already had, and the door pulled me through. No floor, no ceiling, just falling again. But this time, I didn't land. Not yet. Because I'm still falling. Still trapped between floors of a house that multiplies itself with every memory you lose. And somewhere above me, or maybe below, the other version of me is waking up, wearing my name, saying my words, pretending he was never replaced. It was at the end of the hallway, where there had never been a door. Not even a wall that suggested one had once been there. I knew the house. I'd measured it. Counted steps between rooms. Timed how long it took to move from the kitchen to the front door. I'd spent so long inside its ribs that even the shadows had a schedule. But now, where the wallpaper used to ripple from old moisture damage, there was a door, smooth. Painted the same pale yellow as the hallway, no handle, no frame, just there, and it was breathing, not in sound, but motion. Slow, rhythmic swelling, in and out, as if the wall had lungs now, as if it was alive and waiting to be noticed. I didn't touch it, not at first. But it knew I was looking. It always knows. And after a while, pretending not to see it felt more dangerous than admitting it was real. I pressed my hand against the surface. It was warm. Warmer than any wall should be. And behind it, I felt the thrum. Not a heartbeat exactly, but close. Like something big and asleep, resting on the other side. Something waiting to wake up. It opened on its own. Not wide, just enough. A slice of shadow across my shoulder, a breath of cold air across my cheek. I leaned closer, peering into the dark, and it pulled. Not hard, just enough to unbalance me, and I was inside. The room was circular, windowless, empty, but the air had weight, like I'd stepped into a mouth just before it spoke. And the walls weren't walls. They were pages. Floor to ceiling, bound like skin, stitched together with something too dark to be thread. Pages endless and shifting, covered in writing. Not printed. Written in a hand that mimicked mine but wasn't mine. Each letter shook slightly, as if the words themselves were alive, quivering beneath the ink. I tried to read one line, but the moment my eyes landed, the letters rearranged. Dancing, scrambling, changing. It wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be felt. So I let the words wash over me. I didn't fight the meaning. I just let it in. And what I felt was memory. Not mine, but familiar. Like dreams from a life I'd never lived, emotions packed in boxes I never opened. There were smells, wet leaves, burnt cloth. A trace of something sweet and rotting. There were sounds. Laughter muffled by a pillow, breathing just behind your head, even when you're alone. And beneath it all, Abby's voice, whispering from nowhere, from everywhere. She doesn't remember the rules. She wore your voice too long. She still thinks you're the first. I turned. The door was gone, not closed, gone. Only the circle, only the pages. And in the center of the room, where the light didn't reach, something began to rise. Not fast, not threatening, just deliberate, a shape. No detail, just density. Like someone had painted shadow onto the air, it stood tall. Taller than human. Limbs too thin, neck too long. No face. But I recognized it. Not visually, viscerally. I knew this thing. It had been here longer than the house, longer than the memory of the house. And it began to speak. Not aloud, inside. It said, This room isn't new. You forgot it. You've forgotten many things. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The pages behind me pressed tighter, curling at the edges like they were listening too. It stepped closer. The space bent. My knees buckled. I fell to the floor, and the moment I touched it, I felt the heartbeat beneath. Steady. Ancient. I whispered, What are you? And it answered, I am the story that outlived its teller. It crouched beside me, and where its face should have been, a mirror shimmered. In it, I saw myself, but not the version from now. Not this house-worn wreck. It was younger me, hopeful. Naive. The one who still believed the house could be left behind. And he looked afraid. Because he could see me. And I realized in that instant, this room didn't trap people. It preserved them. Each version of me that had entered this house, that had found its secrets, its doors, its truths, they never left. They were filed. Cataloged. Bound in pages lining the walls. This room was an archive. And I was just the latest entry. The shape leaned forward. The mirror of its face, so close I could feel its cold surface against mine. And it said, You're almost ready to be read. The light flickered. The ink on the walls blood. And I remembered something I never wanted to. A moment. Years ago. Before Abby disappeared. She found this room first. I didn't believe her. I told her it was just a nightmare, a symptom of the stress. I didn't go with her. I let her face it alone. And when she came back, she wasn't the same. She didn't speak for days. When she finally did, her voice was too calm, too slow. Like it had to remember how to be human. I asked her what she saw, and she said, The house writes us down. That's how it keeps us. Now I know what she meant, because the shape with the mirrored face took my hand and pressed it to the floor. And where my skin met the surface, words formed, in my handwriting, written in me, a title, a beginning. Chapter 1, The Visitor Who Wouldn't Leave. And beneath it, the ink shimmered and shifted, preparing to write the rest. It's still writing now. As I sit here, the door gone, the pages trembling, the mirror watching, every thought I have, every regret, every memory I try to bury, it writes. And soon I'll just be another story, bound in skin, read by shadows, forgotten by the world above. I don't know how long I've been in here. The room, the archive, the breathing circle of ink and memory doesn't have time. The words don't tick forward, they spiral, pulling you in. I tried to resist it, tried to close my eyes and pretend I could shut the story out. But the moment I did, the whispering began again. Not from the shadow with the mirrored face, not from the pages, but from somewhere deeper, beneath even the bones of this house. It began as a hum, low, almost soothing. The kind of sound you hear before falling asleep in the passenger seat of a long drive when the world goes still. But beneath that hum were voices. Layers of them, woven so tightly they weren't speaking to each other. They were speaking through each other. Dozens, hundreds, all of them whispering in perfect, breathless rhythm. And they were saying names. Not just mine. Not just Abby's. Names I'd forgotten. Names I'd never learned. I recognized one. From years ago. A kid I used to know in school, Caleb. He disappeared when we were 10. They said his parents took him in the night. Moved suddenly. No goodbye. But I remember the way he used to draw pictures in the margins of his notebooks. Spirals. Doorways. A house that looked exactly like this one. Even though we'd never lived near a place like it. His name was the loudest among the whispers. followed by another, and another, all gone. All written down. This house wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by stories that never finished. People whose names had been half spoken, whose voices had been borrowed and worn like masks until the original meaning slipped away. The whispers were cataloging them, and I was next. I ran, or I tried. The room fought me. Pages curled beneath my feet, wrapped around my ankles. The ink bled into my skin. My own handwriting appeared on my arms, crawling upward like veins. The words it wrote were wrong. Lies about who I was. Things I'd never done. Places I'd never been. It was rewriting me, one sentence at a time. But I remembered something Abby said once, before everything started falling apart. Before she vanished, before she turned quiet and strange. There are cracks between the walls, she whispered to me one night. That's where the truth hides. That's where she listens. At the time I thought she was dreaming. Now I know she wasn't. I looked to the edges of the room, where page met plaster, and there it was, a sliver, barely wider than a finger, a crack, and from within it the sound of breathing. Not mine, not the shapes, Abby's, shallowed, but real. I clawed at the gap, tore at it with nails already bloodied from earlier nights. The paper peeled away, revealing wood, old, splintering. I forced my fingers into the opening and pulled. It fought back, screamed without sound. But I didn't let go. The moment the hole widened enough for my shoulder, I shoved myself through. The passage was tight, barely a crawl space. The walls breathed. The light was gone. Only the sound remained, breath, footsteps. And somewhere, deeper still, the sound of scratching. I moved forward blind, each shuffle dragging my skin against pulsing walls, each movement a risk. But something in me knew. This was the only way. This was the truth Abby had found, the path she had carved with pain and silence. After what felt like hours, or no time at all, I emerged into a crawlspace between walls. Just wooden beams and thick insulation soaked with something that wasn't water. The walls weren't smooth. They bulged in places, as though bodies had pressed against them from inside the plaster, trying to push through. Fingers, mouths, a shoulder blade, all frozen mid-reach. They whispered, those shapes, not threats, not warnings, just confusion, like they didn't know who they were anymore. Like the house had told their stories so many times they'd forgotten. That's when I saw her, Abby, huddled in a corner, alive, but not whole. Her hair had thinned. Her skin was covered in tiny words, written so densely they looked like veins. She was mouthing something. Over and over. I crawled to her, put a hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch, didn't look up. Just whispered, they took your ending. I asked her what she meant, and she said, you think you're still in control, but the house chooses how your story finishes. Unless, she looked at me then, eyes fogged with dust. Unless you take it back, how? I asked. She lifted her hand and showed me something clenched in her fist, a match, old, bent. The kind our mother used to light candles with when the power went out. Fire, she whispered. The house can consume, but it can't remember flames. They erase everything, even names. I stared at the match, understanding what she was saying. Burn the pages. Burn the names. Burn yourself, if that's what it takes. And maybe, just maybe, you can leave without being remembered. That's what freedom is in this place. Forgetting, I took the match. My hand trembled. The walls began to close again. The breathing grew faster. The voices screamed, not with pain, with fear. Because they knew what I held. They knew what I might do. And they were terrified, not of dying, but of being erased. Because if no one remembers your story, you were never here at all. There was no ceremony to it. No grand shift. No trembling walls or shaking floors. Just a quiet click as I struck the match and a hiss of sulfur that cut through the endless whispering. The flame bloomed like a memory returning, familiar and bright, a reminder of things before the house, before Abby vanished, before the stories swallowed us whole. The air in the crawlspace pulled back, as if the walls themselves were recoiling, stunned by something so old and simple. Fire. Not a scream, not a weapon, but a truth they couldn't rewrite. The flame shivered at first, like it was nervous, then grew steady. Confident, I turned to Abby. Her eyes weren't blank anymore. They reflected the flicker. There was something behind them now. Pain, yes, but also recognition, like a fog had been lifted, or maybe burned away. She nodded. She didn't need to say anything. We both understood. I pressed the match to the edge of the nearest wall. At first, the paper resisted. The words danced, tried to peel away, rearranged themselves into prayers, apologies, even threats. We are you, one line twisted itself to say. We are the only version that lasts. But the fire caught anyway, a small corner, then a seam, and suddenly it was hungry. The pages ignited fast. Faster than paper should. The words curled and blackened, shriveling into ash like brittle skin. But they didn't burn silently, they screamed. The whispers that had hummed constantly in the background turned to shrieks, not in sound but in feeling. I could feel them begging. Stories being erased from memory. Names torn from the fabric of the house. Versions of me, of Abby, of the lost and forgotten, all shrieking as they vanished. Not dying, being unmade. The crawlspace throbbed like a wound. The wood groaned. Beams warped and snapped as the fire ran wild, not just across the surface, but deep into the structure, into the memory of the place. I grabbed Abby's hand. It was warm, real, alive. She stumbled as we crawled, coughing, eyes squinting against the thickening smoke. But she didn't let go. We pushed through a vent at the end of the crawl space, stumbling into a room I hadn't seen since I was a child. It was our old living room, not the way it is now, dusty and drained, but how it used to be. Sunlight streaming in through sheer curtains. A mug of cocoa still warm on the coffee table. The faint sound of cartoons playing from a nearby TV. Abby's laugh frozen in the air, a perfect loop of what once was. Except it was wrong, too perfect, too clean. This room wasn't real, it was a memory. One the house wanted me to step into, to believe in, to stay. I turned in place. The rest of the house behind me was burning, not with flame anymore, but with light. A golden glow swallowing everything. Names, rooms, faces, all turning to cinders. The house was panicking. This final room was a trap, the last thread it could pull. A lie shaped like peace. "Come sit," a voice said behind me. I turned. It was our mother, or something wearing her. She stood in the kitchen, apron tied, smile soft. "Come rest. You've done enough. You don't have to run anymore." Abby squeezed my hand, hard. "Don't listen," she whispered. "It's not her." I stepped forward anyway, because part of me wanted to believe. Who wouldn't? After everything. After the darkness. After the echoing voices and mirrored faces. Who wouldn't want to fall back into that illusion just once? But the fire behind me flared again, and the room flickered, like a dream unraveling. The smile on our mother's face glitched. Once. Then twice. Then melted like wax. The voice turned deeper. Colder. "You don't get to leave. You are the ending. Without you, none of us last." And then the house spoke, not in voice, but in tremor. The floor buckled. The ceiling screamed. The walls began closing in like fists made of memory. I held the matchbox tight, struck the last match inside, and threw it into the center of the room. It didn't burn the walls. It didn't touch the floor. It landed in the air itself, and everything around us began to collapse. Not burn. Collapse. As if the match had undone the spine of the book, and all the pages lost their binding. Rooms folded inward. Doors imploded into cracks. Staircases unraveled like yarn. The house was forgetting itself. And it was beautiful. Abby pulled me toward a shape in the corner. A dark rectangle. Familiar and shifting. The front door. But this time open. Beyond it, just a street, plain, gray sky. No sound, no wind, but real. We ran. The moment we crossed the threshold, everything stopped. No sound, no light, no fire. Just quiet. And then, a blink, and I was standing outside. Barefoot. Alone. The house was gone. No foundation, no rubble, just empty grass, like nothing had ever been built there. I turned in circles, breath catching, heart still pounding. The matchbox was gone from my hand, but the ink on my arms had vanished too, and so had the whispering. Behind me, I heard a footstep. I turned. Abby, smiling. Not the girl I remembered, not the fragment twisted by the house, just her, alive, free. She stepped forward, linked her arm with mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Because the house had let go. Or maybe, just maybe, we had let go of it. But as we walked, hand in hand into the quiet of the world beyond, I still felt one last thing beneath my skin. A name. Not mine, not hers, but its, and it was waiting. Because stories, no matter how far you run, always want to be told again. And some houses remember how to rebuild themselves.